In the desert, silence speaks volumes. And in Dust Valley, Arizona, silence had become a way of life, both for the parched earth and for 12-year-old Noah Rivera. 2 years without words. 2 years since his father's mysterious death. 3 years of relentless drought that had transformed a once thriving community into a desperate wasteland. Some say certain horses appear only in times of great need, ancient guardians with the power to find water where none exists. Creatures of legend that choose those worthy of following them into the unknown. What happens when a boy who cannot speak meets a horse that cannot be tamed? When ancient covenants buried for generations resurface through the intuition of a child? When the very future of a community hangs in the balance of choices made decades before any of them were born? Sometimes the deepest healing begins with the most unexpected guide. And sometimes the most powerful voice emerges only after years of silence. This is the story of a desert that remembers a horse that knows the way, and a boy who found his voice by following both. Arizona, 1946. A savage sandstorm whipped across the desert landscape, obscuring everything in its wake. Two figures struggled against the howling wind, a white man and an elderly Hopi tribal elder, leading a sand-colored mare with a crescent moon marking on her chest. James Rivers pulled his hat down tighter, squinting against the stinging particles, as he followed Talassi toward the hidden cave entrance. The mare whinnied nervously, sensing the tension in both men. "Hurry!" Talassi shouted over the wind. "The storm provides cover, but it won't last forever." They ducked into the narrow cave opening, the sudden silence, almost as startling as the storm's fury. Their lantern cast long shadows against ancient walls adorned with pictographs, spirals, handprints, and horses that seemed to move in the flickering light. Deeper they went, the mare's hooves echoing against stone, until they reached a chamber that opened up like a cathedral beneath the earth. Stalactites hung like frozen tears from the ceiling. "Here," Talassi said, his weathered hand pointing to an alcove carved into the rock. Together they placed a wooden chest intricately carved with ancient Hopi symbols deep within the recess. The mare watched, her intelligent eyes reflecting the lantern light. Talassi removed a clay pot from his pack, uncorking it with reverence. "Blood seals the covenant," he said quietly. "Yours and mine bound to the land." James nodded solemnly, extending his palm. Talassi drew a small obsidian blade across it, collecting the blood that welled up. He did the same to his own hand, mixing both bloods with water from the clay vessel. As they sprinkled the mixture upon the chest, Talassi spoke words that echoed with authority in the chamber. "When the land thirsts and needs healing, one who carries both bloodlines will be guided here. The water-finding horse will choose the worthy one." The mare stepped forward unbidden, pressing her muzzle against the chest, leaving a perfect crescent moon imprint in the dust. "She has witnessed," James whispered. "She will remember." "As will her daughters and their daughters after them," Talassi replied, "until the chosen one comes." The image faded like mist, dissolving into the harsh reality of modern-day desert. Cracked earth stretching to the horizon, the land parched and broken under a merciless sun. Dust Valley, Arizona, 2025. What was once called Green Valley now barely deserved a name at all. 3 years of severe drought had transformed the small desert town into a monument to thirst. Elena Rivera stared out the kitchen window at her withered garden, a cup of carefully rationed water warming in her hands. Water restriction signs dotted the town like grave markers. The municipal well was down to its last reserves. Farmers had abandoned fields. Livestock grew gaunt. At the kitchen table, her father Joseph sat with his grandson Noah, who silently sketched wild horses on a notepad. Noah hadn't spoken a word since his father Miguel's death in a car accident 2 years ago. The boy's dark eyes, his father's eyes, remained fixed on his drawing, his small hand moving with surprising precision for a 12-year-old. "The appointment in Phoenix is next Tuesday," Elena said, turning from the window. "Dr. Sanchez is supposed to be the best child psychologist in the state." Joseph looked up, his weathered face lined with both age and wisdom. At 72, the retired anthropology professor had returned to his Hopi roots, choosing to live traditionally despite his academic background. "The land will heal him, Elena," Joseph said quietly. "Not the white man's medicine, Elena slammed her cup down, water sloshing over the rim, a wasteful gesture that immediately filled her with guilt. 2 years, Dad. 2 years of silence. Nothing's changing. It takes time. We don't have time. I can't lose him too. Elena's voice cracked. She glanced at Noah, who continued drawing, as if he hadn't heard, though his pencil pressed harder against the paper. Miguel is gone. I can't wait forever for Noah to find his way back. Joseph sighed, reaching across the table to touch his grandson's arm. The boy carries two worlds inside him, just as you do, just as Miguel did. Rushing healing only creates deeper wounds. Elena began packing dishes into a box on the counter. I've already given notice at work. We'll stay in Phoenix for the initial treatment period, and if it helps, we might relocate permanently. You would take him from his home, from his heritage. Joseph's voice remained calm, but his eyes flashed with concern. I'm taking him toward help, Elena replied firmly. What heritage is there in a dying town anyway? Half the businesses have closed. The reservoir is almost empty. The Hopi Reservation is fighting with the town over the last flowing stream. We're all just waiting for the end here. Through the window, Elena spotted a line of black SUVs pulling up to the town hall. The Westland Corporation logo gleamed on their doors. And there they are, she muttered, right on schedule, like vultures. Joseph stood looking over her shoulder. Mayor Harmon has called them in. They're promising water development projects. They're promising to buy up the land for pennies when people get desperate enough, Elena corrected. Miguel warned everyone about companies like them. At the mention of his father, Noah's pencil stopped. A single tear formed in the corner of his eye but didn't fall. Instead, he drew a perfect crescent moon on the chest of the horse in his sketch. Joseph led Noah through the town square later that afternoon. Despite the drought, some habits remained. A group of elderly residents gathered at the local cafe's shaded patio, playing chess and sharing stories of better days. Frank Sullivan looked up from his chess game as they approached. At 70, the Vietnam veteran's leathery skin was darkened by decades in the sun, his silver hair pulled back in a ponytail. As the owner of the only remaining horse ranch on the outskirts of town, he was a living link to the region's past. Joseph! Frank nodded, then smiled at Noah. And young artist. Come to hear some old-timers' tales. Noah didn't respond but sat in an empty chair, still clutching his sketchbook. Grace Martinez, a former nurse who now ran the town's only pharmacy, poured iced tea from a pitcher. I saved this for you, she told Noah, placing a glass before him. Made with water from my garden cistern. Joseph raised an eyebrow. Your garden still thrives. Grace nodded proudly. Traditional water conservation methods. My grandmother taught me. The old ways still work when new ones fail. The elders fell into reminiscing about Green Valley, what Dust Valley had been called in their youth when water was plentiful and communities lived in harmony. The land remembers, Joseph said quietly, even if people forget. Their conversation halted as a man in an expensive suit approached the cafe. Robert Rivers carried himself with the confidence of success, his silver-streaked dark hair perfectly styled, his smile practiced and political. Afternoon, folks, he said pleasantly. Hot enough for you. An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Frank and Robert exchanged tense glances, decades of unspoken history passing between them. What brings Westland's star partner to our humble cafe? Frank finally asked, his tone carefully neutral. Just checking in on my investment, Robert replied smoothly. The mayor seems receptive to our development proposal. Joseph studied Robert with undisguised suspicion. Funny how your company arrives right when the drought is at its worst. Robert's smile didn't waver. Westland provides solutions to communities in need, Professor Rivera. That's all? The tension was broken by Noah suddenly looking up, his attention caught by something across the square. The adults followed his gaze but saw nothing unusual. Frank cleared his throat. Speaking of unusual sightings, the ghost horses are back. This captured everyone's interest. Frank seldom spoke of the wild horses he occasionally tracked in the desert. I've seen them drinking at Moon Valley, he continued, a small herd led by a sand-colored mare. They appear before big changes come to the valley. Always have. Robert's expression flickered briefly before returning to professional neutrality. Folk tales won't bring rain, Sullivan. Nana. Neither will selling our souls to corporations, Frank replied evenly. As Robert walked away, Joseph noticed how intently Noah was watching the exchange, his dark eyes moving from Frank to Robert with unusual focus. "Some secrets are buried deep," Joseph whispered to his grandson, "but the desert never keeps them forever." The cemetery sat on a low hill overlooking the valley. Elena placed flowers on Miguel's grave, while Joseph performed a small Hopi ritual, burning sacred herbs and whispering prayers in his native tongue. Noah stood between them, silent as always, his small hand resting on the sun-warmed headstone. "2 years today," Elena said softly. "I still expect to see him walking through the door covered in dust from fieldwork, laughing about some discovery." Joseph nodded. "The dead walk beside us always. Miguel's spirit is strong here." Elena wiped away tears. "I just wish Noah could—" She stopped herself, not wanting to pressure the boy even on this painful anniversary. As they turned to leave, Noah suddenly froze, staring past the cemetery gates. Following his gaze, Elena gasped. Standing perfectly still about 50 yards away was a sand-colored mare, watching them with intelligence that seemed almost supernatural. Most striking was the crescent-shaped marking on her chest, visible even at this distance. "Is that—" Elena began. "Echo," Joseph whispered recognition in his voice. "One of the wild ones." Noah took a step toward the horse, seemingly drawn by an invisible connection. "Noah, no," Elena called, alarmed. "Wild horses are dangerous." The boy stopped, but his eyes remained locked with the mare's. As they watched, something impossible happened. A single tear fell from the horse's eye, dropping to the parched earth. "Water in the desert," Joseph murmured too quietly for Elena to hear. That night, Noah woke to moonlight flooding his bedroom. Sitting up, he saw a silhouette outside his window, Echo standing perfectly still in the silver light watching him. The boy slipped from bed and went to the window, pressing his hand against the glass. The horse mirrored his movement, stepping closer until her muzzle almost touched the window. Noah grabbed his sketchbook, drawing the horse with quick, sure strokes. When the paper slipped from his hands to the floor, he noticed a small water droplet appear on the page, though there was no source it could have come from. Later, Joseph found Noah still awake, examining the now dry paper. "You've seen her," Joseph said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "The water-finding horse." Noah looked up questioningly. "An old Hopi legend," Joseph explained. "In times of great drought, special horses would appear to lead the worthy to hidden water sources, saving the tribe." Noah's eyes widened with interest. "There was an agreement," Joseph continued hesitantly, "between my grandfather Talassi and a man named James Rivers. A sacred trust." He paused, studying his grandson's face. "But some secrets belong to the land, Noah, not to people. They reveal themselves only when the time is right." The boy pointed to his drawing, then to Joseph, his question clear. "Yes," Joseph confirmed. "The crescent mark is the sign. She has chosen you just as she once chose your father." The town hall was packed beyond capacity the next evening. Mayor Harmon, a pragmatic man of 68 with no patience for sentiment, stood beside Robert Rivers and a Westland executive named Drake, a cold-eyed man whose suit seemed too tight for his muscular frame. "Folks, we need to face facts," Harmon announced. 3 years of drought has depleted our resources. The state emergency funds are stretched thin. Westland Corporation has offered a solution, a buyout of both town and reservation land to implement an advanced water management system. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Joseph sat with the Hopi elders, their faces impassive, but their eyes alert with suspicion. "This isn't a solution, it's a takeover," Joseph spoke up. "Once Westland controls the water rights, they control everything." Drake stepped forward. "Professor Rivera, we're offering fair market value for land that's becoming worthless without water. Our technology can revitalize this region." "At what cost?" Frank Sullivan challenged from the back. "Your company has a history of depleting aquifers for profit." Robert Rivers took the microphone, his voice smooth and reasonable. "As someone with family ties to this valley going back generations, I personally guarantee Westland's commitment to sustainability. We're bringing modern solutions to an area stuck in outdated thinking." The debate grew heated, dividing the town between those desperate enough to consider the offer and those suspicious of Westland's true intentions. Elena watched the proceedings with growing concern, suddenly noticing Noah was no longer beside her. Slipping out of the hall, she scanned the darkening town square. What she couldn't see was Noah at the edge of town where Echo waited patiently. The boy approached the mare slowly, reaching out to touch her warm muzzle. Echo lowered her head, allowing the contact. "You want me to follow you, don't you?" Noah whispered, his voice rusty from disuse. Echo nickered softly, turning her body to offer her back. Without hesitation, Noah climbed onto the bare back of the wild horse, his small hands gripping her mane. As if she'd been waiting for this moment, Echo immediately turned toward the open desert, breaking into a steady lope. Behind them, a sandstorm began to rise on the horizon, cutting off any path of return. Inside the town hall, Elena suddenly felt a mother's intuition that something was terribly wrong. Rushing outside, she searched frantically for her son, calling his name. Joseph joined her, his eyes drawn to the distant storm and the small silhouette disappearing into it. "Noah!" Elena screamed, starting to run after him. Joseph caught her arm. "It's too late. The storm is too dangerous." "What's happening?" Elena demanded, panic rising in her voice. "Where is he going?" Joseph stared into the swirling sand with a mixture of fear and strange hope. "He has been chosen," he said quietly, "just like Miguel before him." The sandstorm enveloped Noah and Echo like a living thing, sand particles stinging the boy's skin. He buried his face in the mare's mane, trusting her completely despite the rational fear that screamed in his mind. Echo moved with unwavering confidence through the blinding storm, her hooves finding purchase on ground she couldn't possibly see. Noah's heart pounded, but beneath his terror lay a strange certainty. The horse would protect him. Hours seemed to pass, though it might have been minutes. Gradually, the howling wind subsided, and Noah raised his head to find they had entered a narrow canyon. The high walls blocked the worst of the storm, creating an eerie stillness. Echo picked her way carefully down a barely visible path until they reached a small hidden oasis, a pocket of green nestled between massive boulders, with a tiny spring bubbling up from beneath the rocks. Noah slid from the horse's back, his legs trembling. Night had fallen, and the desert cold began to seep into his bones. He hadn't thought to bring a jacket, food, or water. Panic threatened to overwhelm him until Echo nudged him gently toward the spring. The boy knelt and cupped his hands, drinking the cool, sweet water. Echo drank beside him, her presence oddly comforting in this alien landscape. A distant howl pierced the night. Noah froze, recognizing the sound of coyotes, or possibly wolves. Echo's ears pricked forward, but she showed no fear. Instead, she positioned herself between Noah and the direction of the sound, a living shield. Noah gathered dried brush and built a small fire using the matches Joseph had taught him to always carry. As the flames cast dancing shadows across the canyon walls, he leaned against Echo's warm side, drawing comfort from her steady heartbeat. "Are you really magic?" he whispered, his voice emerging easier in this strange place than it had at home for 2 years. Echo turned her head, regarding him with eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. She nickered softly, as if encouraging him to speak more. "Dad used to tell me stories about special horses." Noah continued, the words coming slowly after so much silence. "I thought they were just stories." The horse remained attentive, her ears flicking toward his voice. Noah reached out tentatively, running his fingers along her neck until he reached the crescent moon marking on her chest. As he touched it, he realized it wasn't a natural marking at all, but a scar, old and healed, but clearly made by some kind of projectile. The moment his fingers traced the crescent, a flash of imagery burst in his mind. A man who looked remarkably like his father, but younger, tending to a wounded foal with the same distinctive coloring as Echo. Noah jerked his hand away, startled by the vision. "Dad knew you didn't. He whispered. Echo pressed her muzzle against his cheek, the gesture somehow both confirmation and comfort. For the first time since Miguel's death, Noah felt something other than numbness, a spark of curiosity, a desire to understand. He spent the night talking to Echo in halting sentences, his voice growing stronger with each word. Sure. Back in Dust Valley, chaos had erupted. Sheriff Madison, a no-nonsense woman of 58 with silver-streaked black hair and a reputation for fairness, organized search parties, as Elena frantically described Noah's disappearance. "He's 12 years old, alone in the desert, and he doesn't speak," Elena said, her voice tight with fear. We have to find him before the temperature drops. We'll find him, Madison assured her, though her eyes betrayed concern about the sandstorm that had finally passed. I've got teams ready to move out. The search parties divided into sectors. Elena insisted on going with the main group led by Sheriff Madison, while Joseph sought out Kaya, an 80-year-old Hopi elder known for his spiritual wisdom. Frank Sullivan volunteered to search alone. I know how to track horses better than anyone here, he stated simply, especially that herd. Elena looked at him sharply. You know which horse took my son? Frank nodded grimly. If it's the one I think it is, the sand-colored mare with the crescent mark, then this isn't just a runaway. Something bigger is happening. I don't care about legends or superstitions, Elena snapped. I just want my son back. As the teams prepared to depart, a sleek helicopter descended on the town's small landing pad. Robert Rivers emerged immediately approaching Sheriff Madison. I heard about the Rivera boy, he said, his expression genuinely concerned. I've brought Westland's resources to help. Our helicopter has thermal imaging equipment that can cover ground much faster than vehicles. Frank eyed Robert suspiciously. Mighty convenient timing, Rivers. What's your real interest in the boy? Finding a child lost in the desert transcends our differences. Sullivan, Robert replied coolly. Or would you rather stand on principle while the boy's chances diminish? Sheriff Madison intervened before the tension could escalate. We appreciate the assistance, Mr. Rivers. The helicopter will coordinate with our ground teams. As they prepared to move out, Joseph returned with Kaya. The ancient elder carried traditional items for a location ceremony. This is no ordinary disappearance, Kaya informed them. The signs have been building for months. The horse is chosen. Elena threw up her hands in frustration. My son is not part of some mystical prophecy. He's a traumatized child who's wandered into one of the most dangerous deserts in America. Joseph put a calming hand on her shoulder. Elena, right now we need every method available to find him. Let Kaya perform the ceremony. It won't delay the search. Frank mounted his horse, checking his supplies one last time. I'll head for Moon Valley. If the wild herd is involved, that's where they'll go first. As the teams dispersed, Robert Rivers watched Frank ride away, his expression unreadable. He took out his phone and made a brief call, speaking too quietly for anyone to hear. Track Sullivan, he murmured. He knows more than he's letting on. Dawn broke over the desert in a spectacular display of color that Noah might have appreciated under different circumstances. His night in the hidden oasis had passed without incident, but now hunger gnawed at his stomach and uncertainty loomed large. Echo seemed to sense his discomfort. She nudged him toward a small cactus, using her hoof to knock away the spines before biting into it herself, demonstrating it was safe to eat. Noah followed her example carefully, scraping away the remaining spines with a rock and biting into the moist flesh of the plant. It wasn't delicious, but the moisture and nutrients helped ease his hunger. After drinking more from the spring, Noah climbed back onto Echo's back. The mare seemed to be waiting for a decision from him. Where now? He asked, surprised at how easily words came in the horse's presence. Echo tossed her head, indicating a narrow path leading deeper into the canyon system. Without hesitation, Noah gave the mare her head, trusting her instincts more than his own in this wilderness. They traveled through the morning, the landscape gradually changing from open desert to a complex network of ancient canyons. Echo moved with purpose, as if following a map only she could see. By midday, they reached a sheer rock face covered in petroglyphs, ancient symbols carved into the stone. Noah slid from Echo's back, approaching the wall with wonder. His fingers traced spirals, handprints, and horses that seemed remarkably similar to his own drawings. A memory surfaced, so clear it took his breath away. He'd been here before, years ago, riding on his father's shoulders, Miguel pointing to these very symbols. This is the path to the sacred lake, Miguel had said. The old ones recorded it for those who might need to find it again someday. The memory unlocked something in Noah. He turned to Echo, a new determination in his eyes. Dad knew about you, about all of this. Echo nickered softly, pressing her muzzle against Noah's shoulder. He was trying to protect something. Noah continued, the realization building. That's why he was always out in the desert, wasn't it? He wasn't just studying geology. He was looking for something. You know, Elena searched frantically through the night calling Noah's name until her voice grew hoarse. By morning, exhaustion and dehydration had taken their toll, forcing her to return to town briefly for water and supplies. In her desperate state, she found herself digging through Miguel's old belongings. Boxes she'd packed away after his death, too painful to examine until now. Among his field notebooks, she discovered one labeled simply Groundwater Project, with the Westland logo crossed out in red marker. Flipping through the pages, Elena's scientific mind began connecting dots her grief had prevented her from seeing before. Miguel had been investigating Westland's activities in the region, specifically their impact on the groundwater system. His notes suggested the company had been secretly diverting underground water flows, potentially causing or worsening the drought conditions. "Oh, Miguel," she whispered, "what did you discover?" A knock at the door interrupted her reading. Sheriff Madison stood there, her expression grim. "Any news?" Elena asked, heart-pounding. "Nothing concrete yet," Madison replied, "but we found horse tracks matching the description. They lead deep into the canyonlands. Terrain too rough for vehicles." "Then I'll go on horseback," Elena said immediately. Madison nodded. "Frank Sullivan is already tracking them. He knows those canyons better than anyone." "But Elena, there's something else." She hesitated. "The tracks sometimes disappear completely on hard rock where they should be visible. Frank says it's unusual." Elena gathered her supplies, refusing to consider the implications. "I don't care if it's unusual. I don't care about magic horses or Hopi legends. I'm going to find my son." As she prepared to leave, she tucked Miguel's notebook into her pack. Whatever he had discovered about Westland might somehow be connected to Noah's disappearance. Tamai, Joseph and Kaya conducted their ceremony in a sacred space on the reservation, burning herbs and chanting prayers that had remained unchanged for centuries. In the smoke, images formed, fleeting but clear to both men: a cave entrance, ancient symbols, water flowing from stone. "The ancestors' cave," Kaya whispered, recognition in his eyes. "The place of the old covenant." "Are you certain?" Joseph asked, his voice tight with concern. Kaya nodded solemnly. "The vision is clear. The boy has been called to complete what was started generations ago." Joseph closed his eyes, memories washing over him. "My grandfather spoke of a pact between our people and the Rivers family. Something about protecting a sacred source. The pact was forgotten by the Rivers men," Kaya said, "but not by the horses. They remember what humans choose to forget." Joseph gathered his things quickly. "I need to find Frank Sullivan. He's the only one who knows where the ancestors' cave might be." Before leaving, Kaya gripped Joseph's arm. "Be careful, my friend. There are those who would kill to keep the old secrets buried." Frank Sullivan tracked the horse's trail with the skill of a man who had spent decades in the wilderness. He noticed things others would miss: a displaced stone, a bent twig, the almost invisible impression of a hoof on hard ground. What troubled him was how the trail sometimes seemed to vanish completely, only to reappear miles away. It was as if the horse and boy occasionally traveled through another realm entirely. He'd seen this before decades ago when he and Michael Rivers, Robert's older brother, had tracked the same herd. Before Michael left for Vietnam, before everything changed. Lost in memory, Frank almost missed the drone humming overhead. Small, nearly silent, but unmistakably following him. Westland technology. Without changing his pace or giving any indication he'd noticed, Frank led his horse into a narrow ravine where the drone couldn't easily follow, then doubled back along a hidden path only locals knew existed. When he emerged, he found himself face to face with Robert Rivers, who had apparently anticipated this move. "Hello, Frank," Robert said calmly, sitting on a boulder, as if awaiting an old friend. "Spying on me, Rivers." Frank dismounted, keeping one hand near the knife at his belt. Robert shrugged. "Coordinating search efforts. We have the same goal: finding the boy." "Somehow I doubt that," Frank replied. "Your company has spent years trying to gain control of these lands. Now suddenly you're the Good Samaritan." A flicker of genuine emotion crossed Robert's face. "This isn't about Westland. It's about the Rivera boy." "What's your interest in Noah?" Frank demanded. Robert stood, brushing dust from his expensive pants. "Let's just say I have a debt to pay." "To his father." Frank's eyes narrowed. "You and Miguel were hardly friends." You'd be surprised, Robert said quietly. We had more in common than anyone knew. He gestured toward the canyon. The boy's heading for the ancestors' cave, isn't he? Frank's surprise was evident. How do you know about that place? My father showed it to me once, Robert admitted. Made me swear never to reveal its location. Family obligation, he called it. The two men studied each other, decades of history and mistrust between them. Miguel found something, didn't he? Frank finally asked. Something Westland wants buried. It's complicated, Robert replied, his corporate mask slipping to reveal genuine conflict. Look, we can stand here measuring distrust, or we can find the boy before others do. Others? Robert's expression darkened. Drake isn't just a corporate executive. He's something else, and he's taking a very personal interest in this search. Frank considered this information, years of ranger instincts weighing the sincerity in Robert's words. Finally, he nodded toward a barely visible trail. We go together, he stated firmly. But I'm watching you, Rivers. One wrong move and you'll wish you'd stayed in your helicopter. Noah and Echo continued their journey through the afternoon, deeper into the maze of canyons. The terrain grew increasingly strange. Rock formations that seemed almost artificial passages that appeared to shift when viewed from different angles. They paused at a small water pocket, Noah refilling the canteen he'd found in an old saddlebag hanging from Echo's side. The discovery of the bag had been surprising, evidence that someone had prepared the horse for this journey. Inside, he'd found not just the canteen, but jerky, a small knife, and a faded photograph of his father standing beside a younger Echo. The image confirmed what Noah had begun to suspect. His father had been connected to the horse and whatever mystery surrounded her. As Noah drank, Echo suddenly tensed her ears, swiveling toward a sound only she could hear. Without warning, she pushed Noah behind a large boulder, with her body just as voices echoed from a nearby canyon. Spread out. The tracks lead this way. The voice was harsh, unfamiliar. Rivers wants the boy alive, but don't take any chances with the horse. Shoot it if necessary. Noah's heart pounded as he peered around the rock. Three men in Westland uniforms moved through the canyon, rifles in hand. They weren't part of any search party. They moved with military precision, scanning for threats. Echo remained perfectly still, her body shielding Noah. Only when the men passed did she nudge him toward a nearly invisible crevice in the canyon wall. Noah hesitated only briefly before squeezing through the narrow opening. Echo couldn't possibly follow. The gap was barely wide enough for a child. Yet somehow, impossibly, when he looked back, the mare was directly behind him in a passage that should have been too small for her. The crevice opened into a tunnel that sloped downward, glowing with an eerie blue-green light that seemed to emanate from the stone itself. Noah moved forward, drawn by an inexplicable certainty that this was the path he was meant to take. The tunnel widened into a vast underground chamber where a small pool of water glimmered like liquid starlight. But it wasn't the pool that captured Noah's attention. It was the young girl sitting beside it, weaving a complex pattern from reeds. She looked up as they entered, entirely unsurprised by their appearance. Around 11 years old, with the distinctive features of Hopi heritage, she smiled as if greeting an expected guest. "You're late," she said simply, "but that's okay. The horse always knows the right time, even when humans don't." Noah stared, finding his voice after a moment of shock. "Who are you?" The girl stood, brushing off her traditional dress. "I'm Luna, and you're Noah Rivera, the one Echo has chosen." She approached without fear, placing a hand on Echo's neck. "She's been waiting for you for a long time." Noah looked between the girl and the horse, confusion evident. "Waiting for what? Where are we?" Luna's smile widened. "This is just the entrance. The real village is through there." She pointed to an opening on the far side of the chamber. "Moon Village, where the people of the water have lived since the great shaking changed the land." As if in a dream, Noah followed Luna and Echo through the opening and gasped at what lay beyond. Nestled in a hidden valley completely surrounded by towering cliffs was a small village of traditional Hopi buildings. Gardens grew in terraced plots fed by a system of channels directing water from a spring that emerged from the cliff face. People moved about their daily tasks, looking up with interest but not surprise as the outsider entered their hidden world. "How is this possible?" Noah whispered. "No one knows this place exists." "Many know," Luna corrected, But only those Echo brings can find it. The horse decides who is worthy to see our home. An elderly man approached, his face deeply lined with age, but his eyes sharp and clear. He carried a staff adorned with feathers and silver symbols that caught the light. "Welcome, Noah Rivera," he said, his voice strong, despite his apparent age. "I am a Hote elder of Moon Village. We have been expecting you." Noah found himself at a loss for words, overwhelmed by the impossibility of this hidden world existing so close to his dying hometown. Ahote seemed to understand his confusion. "Come, there is much to explain, and little time to do so. The balance has been disturbed, and now you must help restore it, as your father tried to do before you." The mention of his father snapped Noah to attention. "My dad knew about this place." Ahote nodded solemnly. "Miguel Rivera was our friend and protector. His journey was cut short, but the path remains. Echo has chosen you to continue what he began." Noah looked at the sand-colored mare, who returned his gaze with quiet intelligence. For the first time since his father's death, Noah felt a sense of purpose stirring within him, a connection to something larger than his grief. "Show me," he said simply. In Dust Valley, Elena and Joseph independently made discoveries that would change everything. While searching through Old Town records, they uncovered a map from 1946 showing a moon lake that had mysteriously disappeared after an earthquake in 1952. Alongside it were cryptic references to a Hopi treasure that had been hidden away. "This can't be coincidence," Elena said, spreading the yellow documents across the archive table. Miguel was investigating underwater systems. He believed the drought wasn't entirely natural. Joseph studied the map carefully. The old stories speak of a hidden water source, one that could sustain the entire valley even in the worst droughts. Most considered it a legend. But Miguel didn't, Elena realized. He was looking for it. Joseph traced the location where Moon Lake had once existed. And perhaps he found it, which would explain why his accident happened when it did. Elena looked up sharply. "You think his death wasn't an accident?" Before Joseph could answer, the archive door opened, and Sheriff Madison entered with a troubled expression. "We've got a situation," she said without preamble. "Frank Sullivan and Robert Rivers have both gone missing from the search grid, and we've spotted unauthorized Westland personnel moving through the canyons with weapons." Elena gathered the maps quickly. "They're not looking for Noah to rescue him. They're searching for whatever Miguel discovered. We need to find Frank," Joseph said urgently. "He knows these canyons better than anyone. If Noah is heading where I think he is, Frank will know how to get there." Sheriff Madison nodded grimly. "I've already called in deputies from neighboring counties. But Elena, Joseph, this is becoming something more than a missing child case." "It always was," Joseph replied solemnly. "We just didn't see it until now." As they hurried from the archives, Joseph pulled Elena aside. "There's one more place we need to check. Miguel's research station in the old mine office. He might have left something there that could help us." The hidden research station was exactly as Miguel had left it 2 years ago. A small room filled with geological equipment maps covering the walls and a computer that had gathered dust since his death. Elena ran her fingers over his desk, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "I couldn't bear to come here after it happened." Joseph moved directly to a locked cabinet. "Miguel gave me a key," he explained, producing an old brass key from a leather pouch around his neck. "Said if anything ever happened to him, I should look here." The cabinet contained field journals, water samples, and a sealed envelope addressed to Elena in Miguel's handwriting. With trembling hands, she opened it, revealing a USB drive and a brief note. "If you're reading this, I couldn't finish what I started. Westland is diverting the ancient aquifer system, causing artificial drought to force land sales. The evidence is here. Trust no one except Joseph Frank and, oddly enough, Robert Rivers. He's not what he seems. Follow Echo. She knows the way to the truth. All my love, M." Elena stared at the note in disbelief. Robert Rivers, Miguel trusted him. Joseph looked equally surprised. "And who is Echo?" "The horse." Elena whispered, the pieces finally connecting. "The sand-colored mare with the crescent mark. Miguel called her Echo." They inserted the USB drive into Miguel's old computer. It contained hundreds of files. Water analysis reports, satellite imagery showing Westland's secret diversion system, and most damning of all, internal emails discussing the manufactured water crisis as an acquisition strategy. "This is why he died," Elena said, her voice hardening with certainty. "He was going to expose them." Joseph noticed something else. A folder labeled Ancestors' Cave, containing photographs of ancient petroglyphs and a crude map. "This is where Noah is heading," he said with growing urgency. "The sacred site where the waters converge beneath the earth. If Westland finds it first." Elena was already gathering the USB drive and crucial documents. "We need to get to that cave before they do. For Noah, for Miguel, for everyone in this valley." As they hurried from the research station, neither noticed the small drone hovering outside the window, its camera capturing their every move. In Moon Village, Noah sat with Ahote and the elders in a circular chamber, its walls adorned with the same symbols Noah had been drawing for 2 years. "How do I know these?" Noah asked, pointing to the intricate patterns. "The knowledge lives in your blood," Ahote explained. "You carry two powerful lineages, Hopi wisdom through your grandfather's line, and the river's family covenant through your father." "What covenant?" Ahote gestured for Luna to bring a small wooden box. From it he removed an ancient photograph showing two men, one Hopi, one white, standing before a cave entrance with a young sand-colored foal between them. "Talassi, your great-great-grandfather, and James Rivers made a sacred pact in 1946, Ahote explained. They discovered an ancient water system beneath the desert, one that could sustain life even in the worst droughts. But they also discovered something dangerous, uranium deposits that could poison the water if disturbed, Kerunoninon. This was during the early uranium rush," Luna added, "when the government was paying big money for new deposits." Ahote nodded. "They made a pact to protect the water source. The Rivers family would use their influence with the white authorities to keep mining away from the sacred waters. The Hopi would guard the ancient knowledge of how the system worked. The horse, Echo, became the guardian spirit," Luna continued. "Only those chosen by Echo could find the hidden water source or Moon Village." Noah looked at the photograph again. But something went wrong. "The covenant was forgotten," Ahote said sadly. "James Rivers kept his promise, but his son cared more for wealth than water. The Rivers family became involved with companies that damaged the land." "Until your father," Luna interjected, "Miguel learned the truth and tried to restore the balance. He saved Echo from poachers when she was young, and she became bonded to him." Noah absorbed this information slowly. "And now Westland wants to find the water source." Ahote's expression grew grave. "Not just find it, control it. Their water management system would give them ownership of the entire aquifer. They've already diverted many of the smaller channels, causing the drought to worsen artificially. That's why Dad was investigating them," Noah realized, "and why his car crashed right after he found proof." A heavy silence fell over the chamber. "It wasn't an accident, was it?" Noah finally asked. Ahote met his gaze directly. "We believe not. Your father discovered their diversion system and was going to expose them. The next day, his car went off the road in a place where he had driven hundreds of times without incident." Noah's hands clenched into fists, anger replacing grief for the first time. "They killed him. And now they search for you," Ahote confirmed. "Not to rescue, but to find what you might lead them to." Echo entered the chamber, then moving to Noah's side as if sensing his distress. The boy placed a hand on her neck, drawing strength from her presence. "There's more," Ahote said. "The true treasure isn't just water. It's evidence. Your father hid documents in the Ancestors' Cave, proof of Westland's crimes, maps of the original water system, and the ancient knowledge of how to restore balance to the land." Noah stood a new determination in his posture. "Then I need to find it, before they do." Ahote studied the boy carefully. "It is dangerous. Westland's men search the canyons. They will not hesitate to harm anyone who stands in their way." "I don't care," Noah said, his voice stronger than it had been in 2 years. "Dad tried to protect the water. Now it's my turn." Luna stepped forward. "I can guide you to the cave entrance. I know paths even Westland's drones can't find." Echo nickered softly, nudging Noah's shoulder as if affirming her willingness to help. Ahote nodded solemnly. "Then it is decided. Rest tonight, and at dawn you will begin the final journey to the Ancestors' Cave." As the elders dispersed, Noah remained with Echo in the chamber, studying the ancient symbols by torchlight. "I'm going to finish what Dad started," he whispered to the horse. "For him, for everyone." Echo pressed her muzzle against Noah's chest, directly over his heart, in what felt like a solemn promise. Outside Moon Village, unseen by its protected inhabitants, Westland helicopters circled the canyon rims, thermal imaging equipment scanning the rocks below. In one of the aircraft, Drake studied a tablet showing heat signatures moving through the hidden valley. "We've found them," he said into his radio. "Prepare the extraction team. I want the boy and whatever he's found. Eliminate anyone who interferes." The helicopter banked sharply, heading back to the makeshift base Westland had established at the edge of Dust Valley. What Drake didn't notice was the small private aircraft following at a discreet distance. Frank Sullivan at the controls with Robert Rivers beside him, their decades-old animosity temporarily set aside in pursuit of a greater purpose. "They found the village," Frank said grimly. Robert checked the revolver concealed under his jacket. "Then we don't have much time." "Never thought I'd see the day when a Rivers would fight against a corporation," Frank remarked. Robert's expression remained grim. "Miguel was like a brother to me despite our differences. I owe him this, and I owe it to my own father, whose legacy I've dishonored for too long." Frank studied his old friend's brother with new eyes. "You've been playing a double game all along, haven't you? Let's just say my partnership with Westland has been strategically valuable for gathering evidence," Robert replied, "but now they've forced my hand." As dawn approached, all the players in this desert drama converged on a single destination, the Ancestors' Cave, where ancient secrets and modern crimes would finally come to light. Noah, curled beside Echo in a small alcove of Moon Village, slept fitfully, dreaming of rushing water and his father's voice calling him forward. In his dream, Miguel stood at the entrance to a cave, beckoning his son toward a wooden chest carved with symbols of two worlds united. "The key is in your blood," Dream Miguel said. "Two lineages, one purpose. Find the water, reveal the truth." Noah woke with the first light, the dream still vivid in his mind. Echo was already awake, watching him with those intelligent eyes that seemed to understand everything. "I'm ready," Noah told her, feeling more certain than he had in years. The final journey was about to begin. "I've completed part 1 of The Call of the Desert, approximately 6 stallion words establishing the character setting and central conflict while maintaining the cinematic style, emotional depth, and the human-animal connection requested. The story follows the outline, closely introducing Noah's psychological wound, his connection with Echo the guiding animal, and ending with his decision to embark on the journey. Would you like me to continue with part 2, which will focus on Noah's journey discoveries and inner healing?" The dawn painted the hidden valley in shades of gold and amber as Noah prepared to leave Moon Village. Luna had packed him a small bag of provisions, dried fruit flatbread, and a water skin filled with spring water. Ahote presented him with a carved wooden amulet shaped like a horse with a crescent moon. "This will help focus your connection with Echo," the elder explained. "When in doubt, trust the horse. She knows the way, even when the path seems lost." Noah slipped the amulet around his neck, feeling its weight against his chest. "How will I know what to do when I find the cave?" "Your blood will remember," Ahote replied cryptically, "just as it remembered the symbols you've been drawing all these years." Luna hugged Noah briefly. "I'll lead you to the hidden passage. From there, Echo will guide you to the Ancestors' Cave." The villagers gathered to witness their departure, offering prayers and blessings. Noah felt the weight of their expectations, but also their support. For the first time since his father's death, he didn't feel alone. Echo stood patiently nearby, somehow looking more majestic than ever, her sand-colored coat gleaming in the morning light. When Noah approached, she lowered her head in what almost seemed like a bow. "We're in this together," Noah whispered, stroking her muzzle. Luna led them through a narrow fissure in the canyon wall that opened into a labyrinth of passages. "This is where I leave you," she said, pointing to a path that sloped upward. "That route will take you above the canyons. You'll be exposed, but it's faster than the maze below." Noah nodded, suddenly reluctant to leave the safety of Luna and the village. "Don't worry," Luna added with a smile. "Echo has made this journey many times. And remember, the cave will only reveal itself to one who carries both bloodlines." With a final wave, Noah mounted Echo and headed up the winding path. The mare moved with confidence, picking her way carefully over loose rocks and narrow ledges. By midday, they had emerged onto a high plateau overlooking a vast expanse of desert. From this vantage point, Noah could see for miles the distant outline of Dust Valley, the ribbon of dry riverbed that once flowed with water, and the complex network of canyons spreading like veins across the parched landscape. He also saw something troubling: dust clouds from vehicles moving along the canyon edges and the glint of metal as a helicopter circled in the distance. Westland was searching, and they were getting closer. "We need to move fast," Noah told Echo, leaning close to her ear, but carefully. The horse seemed to understand, choosing a path that kept them concealed behind rock formations whenever possible. They traveled through the afternoon, the sun beating down mercilessly, making Noah grateful for the water Luna had provided. As evening approached, Echo led them to a small cave in the side of a cliff, barely more than a shallow depression, but enough to provide shelter for the night. Noah gathered brush for a small fire, then sat with his back against the cave wall, Echo lying beside him like a protective guardian. In the flickering firelight, Noah examined the crescent scar on Echo's chest more carefully. The mark was old, the fur grown back, silver white against her sand-colored coat. When he touched it, he again experienced a flash of memory. Not his own, but somehow accessible through his connection with the horse. A younger Miguel kneeling beside a wounded foal, carefully extracting what looked like a bullet. "You're safe now," his father's voice echoed in the memory. "They won't hurt you again." Noah pulled his hand away, blinking back tears. "Dad saved you from poachers, didn't he?" Echo nickered softly, nudging Noah's shoulder. "And now you're saving me?" Noah continued, finding it easier to speak to the horse than to any human since his father's death. "Leading me to whatever he was trying to protect." For hours, Noah talked to Echo about everything: his grief over losing his father, his guilt at shutting out his mother and grandfather, his fear of never finding his voice again. The words flowed freely in the presence of the horse, as if Echo's silent understanding created a safe space for his long-suppressed emotions. "I stopped talking because it hurt too much," Noah confessed, like every word was a betrayal of Dad. "If I just stayed silent, maybe it wouldn't be real that he was gone." Echo rested her head in Noah's lap, her large brown eyes reflecting the firelight as she listened. "But he wouldn't want that, would he?" Noah stroked her mane thoughtfully. "He'd want me to finish what he started, to use my voice to tell the truth." As he spoke these words, Noah felt something shift inside him, a loosening of the knot of grief that had bound his voice for 2 years. He wasn't healed, not completely, but something had begun to change from the moment Echo had appeared outside his window. When he finally drifted to sleep, his dreams were not of loss, but of purpose, following his father's footsteps, not in grief, but in determination. Dust Valley buzzed with tension as both official search parties and Westland personnel mobilized. Elena had barely slept, her face drawn with worry, but her eyes sharp with newfound purpose as she pored over Miguel's research. "These water diversion records are damning," she told Sheriff Madison, spreading documents across the station's conference table. "Westland has been systematically redirecting underground water flows away from the valley for 3 years, coinciding exactly with the onset of the drought." Madison studied the evidence, her expression grim. "This goes beyond corporate misconduct. This is criminal endangerment of an entire community." "And likely murder," Elena added quietly. Miguel was going to expose them just before his accident. Joseph entered with Grace Martinez and several Hopi elders, their faces solemn. "We've completed the location ceremony," he announced. "All signs point to the northwestern canyons, specifically to what the old ones called the Weeping Rocks." Grace unfolded a faded map. "My husband surveyed that area in the 1960s. There's a network of caves most unexplored because they were considered sacred by the Hopi. That's where Noah is heading," Elena said with certainty, "and where Westland is focusing their search." Sheriff Madison collected the documents. "I'm calling the state authorities. This evidence is enough for an investigation into Westland, which gives us legal grounds to halt their operations in the area." "It won't stop them," Joseph warned. "Not when they're this close to what they've been seeking. Drake isn't just a corporate executive. He's more like a mercenary. His type doesn't respect badges or legal injunctions." Elena gathered her gear. Then we need to find Noah first, before they do. There's something else you should know, Joseph said hesitantly. The Ancestors' Cave isn't just a historical site. According to tradition, it contains the key to the entire underground water system. Knowledge that could either restore the valley or, in the wrong hands, give someone absolute control over water distribution for hundreds of miles. Elena shouldered her pack, checking the satellite phone and GPS. All the more reason to hurry. Noah has a head start, but he's just a boy on horseback. Not just any horse, Joseph reminded her, and not just any boy. He carries two bloodlines that were destined to protect the waters. That counts for something in this land. As they prepared to depart, Madison's radio crackled with an urgent message. Westland helicopters had been spotted landing heavily armed personnel near the northwestern canyons. This isn't a search and rescue anymore, Madison said grimly. It's looking more like a military operation. Elena checked the handgun Madison had provided her, a precaution she hoped she wouldn't need. Let's move. Every minute counts now. Frank Sullivan's small plane circled above the canyon region, staying high enough to avoid detection by Westland's helicopters. Beside him, Robert Rivers studied a topographical map marking the locations of Westland personnel they'd spotted. They're establishing a perimeter around this entire section, Robert observed. Drake knows the cave is somewhere in this radius. Frank banked the plane slightly, pointing to a distant rock formation. The Weeping Rocks. That's where the Ancestors' Cave is located, according to Hopi tradition. Can we land nearby? Frank shook his head. Not with this plane. We'll need to set down at the old mining airstrip about 5 miles east and go in on foot. Robert checked his satellite phone. I've uploaded all the evidence I've gathered on Westland's illegal activities to a secure server. If anything happens to us, it automatically goes to the EPA, FBI, and major news outlets. Frank gave him a sideways glance. You've been planning this for a while. Since Miguel died, Robert admitted. He came to me with his suspicions about Westland's water diversion project, asked me to use my position to gather evidence from the inside. Yet you publicly supported Westland's buyout proposal. Robert's expression hardened. Deep cover requires commitment. I had to be convincing. And the boy, what's your interest in him? A flash of genuine emotion crossed Robert's face. Miguel was more than a colleague. He saved my life once during a flash flood in these very canyons. We became blood brothers in the Hopi tradition. When he died, I promised I'd look after his family. Not very effectively, Frank observed dryly. I had to maintain my cover, Robert replied. But I've been watching, and when I heard the sand-colored mare had appeared to Noah, I knew it was time. Frank guided the plane toward the mining airstrip. Let's hope we're not too late. Drake isn't known for his gentle touch when it comes to acquiring what he wants. Noah woke to Echo's urgent nudging. The sky was still dark pre-dawn light, barely beginning to edge the horizon. The horse was clearly agitated, her ears flicking back and forth and nostrils flared. What is it? Noah whispered, instantly alert. A distant mechanical thrum answered his question. Helicopters approaching from the south. Echo pawed the ground nervously, clearly wanting to move. Noah quickly packed his meager supplies and mounted. Show me where to go, he urged. Echo needed no further encouragement. She set off at a rapid pace along the ridgeline, keeping to shadows and overhangs that would hide them from aerial view. The mare seemed to have an uncanny awareness of the helicopter's movements, changing course whenever the sound grew closer. As the sun rose, Noah caught glimpses of men in Westland uniforms, moving through the canyons below. They were being methodical, checking every possible cave entrance and crevice. Echo led him to a narrow gap between two massive boulders, a space that looked impossibly tight for a horse to navigate. Yet somehow, just as in the passage to Moon Village, Echo managed to squeeze through, bringing them into a hidden ravine, invisible from both air and surrounding high ground. The ravine descended sharply, transitioning into a dry stream bed lined with smooth stones. Echo followed this ancient watercourse with unwavering confidence, her hooves making almost no sound on the soft sand. By midday, they reached a circular depression surrounded by towering rock formations that resembled weeping faces, natural erosion creating the illusion of tears streaming down stone cheeks. In the center stood a single massive boulder shaped like a crescent moon. Echo stopped before this boulder, pawing the ground meaningfully. Noah dismounted, examining the stone. At first he saw nothing unusual, just weathered rock covered with desert varnish. But as he ran his hands over the surface, he felt subtle indentations. Brushing away decades of dust revealed petroglyphs matching those he'd been drawing for years. Spirals, horses, and the distinctive crescent moon symbol. "This is it, isn't it?" Noah whispered. "But how do we get in?" Echo moved to a specific spot and began pawing more insistently at the ground. Noah knelt, digging where she indicated. A few inches down, his fingers struck something metallic. Carefully clearing away more sand, he uncovered an ancient iron ring attached to a stone slab. With effort, Noah managed to lift the slab, revealing a narrow passage leading downward into darkness. Cool air wafted up from below, carrying the unmistakable scent of water. Echo nickered softly, nudging Noah toward the opening. "You can't fit through there," Noah realized with sudden concern. "It's too narrow for a horse." The mare stepped back, then forward again, pushing Noah gently but firmly. "You want me to go alone?" Noah asked, fear evident in his voice. For 2 days, Echo had been his constant companion and protector. The thought of continuing without her filled him with dread. Echo pressed her muzzle against the wooden amulet hanging around Noah's neck, then looked meaningfully at the passageway. Understanding dawned on Noah. "You'll wait here. Guard the entrance." Echo bobbed her head in what could only be interpreted as agreement. Noah took a deep breath, retrieving a small flashlight from his pack. "I'll be back," he promised, giving Echo's neck a final pat before lowering himself into the passage. The tunnel descended steeply for about 30 feet before leveling out. Noah's flashlight beam revealed a corridor carved through solid rock, its walls adorned with ancient paintings depicting horses leading people to water sources. The air grew progressively damper as he advanced, the sound of dripping water echoing in the distance. The passage eventually opened into a vast chamber so large his flashlight couldn't illuminate the ceiling. Stalactites hung like stone daggers above, while stalagmites rose from the floor in fantastic formations. But what took Noah's breath away was the pool of crystalline water in the chamber's center, glowing with an ethereal blue light that seemed to come from within the liquid itself. Near the pool stood an altar-like stone structure, and upon it rested an ancient wooden chest. The same chest from Noah's dream, carved with symbols representing both Hopi traditions and Western influences. As Noah approached, he noticed the chest was secured with an unusual lock. Not a keyhole, but a small basin carved into the wood. Inscriptions in both English and Hopi surrounded it, weathered but still legible. "Only blood of two worlds may unlock the water's secret," Noah read aloud, his voice echoing strangely in the cavern. "Two lineages united in purpose, two promises kept as one." Right. Noah understood immediately. He removed the small knife from his pack, hesitating only briefly, before making a small cut on his palm. As blood welled up, he let several drops fall into the basin. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the basin began to glow with the same blue light as the pool, and a click sounded from within the chest. The lock mechanism released, allowing Noah to lift the heavy wooden lid. Inside lay several items: an ancient leather-bound journal, a set of maps drawn on what appeared to be deer skin, a small clay vessel sealed with wax, and most surprisingly, a modern waterproof case containing what looked like a USB drive. Noah reached for the journal, first opening it carefully to reveal pages filled with two distinct handwritings, one in flowing script, the other in more angular characters. The first entry, dated June 12, 1946, began, "I, James Rivers, and my blood brother Talassi of the Hopi, hereby record our discovery of the ancient water system and our covenant to protect it from exploitation." Noah read eagerly, learning how his ancestors had discovered a vast underground aquifer system that collected water from a 100-mile radius, naturally filtering it through limestone before storing it in massive subterranean reservoirs. The system had been engineered by ancient peoples using principles modern science was only beginning to understand. The journal detailed how uranium deposits threatened to contaminate this water if disturbed by mining, and how James and Talassi had sworn to protect both the water and the knowledge of its existence. They had created a map of the entire system, including the locations of access points where water could be safely drawn without disrupting the delicate balance. Most crucially, they had developed a method to reawaken sections of the system that had gone dormant, knowledge that could potentially reverse the drought conditions in Dust Valley. As Noah turned to the final pages, he found entries in a different, more familiar handwriting, his father's. May 10th, 2023. I've confirmed Westland has been systematically diverting water from the ancient system, causing the aquifer to drop dangerously low. They've installed pumps at key junction points, redirecting flow to their private reservoirs. This explains the unprecedented drought conditions. What they don't realize is that their interference risks collapsing the entire system permanently. Noah's hands trembled as he read his father's final entry, dated just 2 days before his death. I've gathered enough evidence to stop Westland's operation and potentially restore the water system. Robert has agreed to help from inside the company. If anything happens to me, the complete documentation is in the Ancestors' Cave and a backup copy with Robert. Echo knows the way. Noah will understand when the time comes. A noise from the tunnel entrance snapped Noah from his reading. Voices echoed in the passage. Unfamiliar, harsh voices giving commands. Westland had found the cave entrance. Noah quickly gathered the journal maps and USB drive, stuffing them into his pack. He hesitated over the clay vessel, unsure of its significance, but sensing its importance. Adding it to his pack, he looked frantically around the chamber for another exit. The blue pool drew his attention again. Its glow seemed to pulse, highlighting a narrow fissure in the far wall. Noah headed for it, hoping it might provide an escape route. Behind him, footsteps and voices grew louder. The tracks lead this way. The boy must be inside. Noah squeezed through the fissure, finding himself in a smaller chamber with a low ceiling. To his dismay, there was no obvious exit, just smooth rock walls surrounding another smaller pool of the glowing blue water. Trapped Noah clutched his pack tightly, mind racing. The items he'd found were clearly what Westland was after. Evidence of their crimes, plus the ancient knowledge of the water system. He couldn't let them fall into Drake's hands. As the voices drew nearer, Noah made a desperate decision. He removed the amulet Ahote had given him, clutching it tightly in his bleeding palm. Closing his eyes, he concentrated on Echo, trying to somehow convey his predicament to the mare waiting above. "Help me," he whispered, not expecting any real result from such a futile gesture. To his astonishment, the amulet began to warm in his hand, and the pool's blue glow intensified dramatically. The water began to ripple, though there was no breeze in the enclosed chamber. A low rumble vibrated through the rock, and a section of wall beside the pool began to shift, revealing a narrow passage that hadn't been visible before. Without hesitation, Noah dove into the passage, squeezing through just as he heard men entering the main chamber behind him. The new tunnel sloped upward steeply, requiring Noah to scramble on all fours. It was tight, claustrophobic, with barely enough room for his small frame. An adult would never have fit through such a space. After what felt like an eternity of climbing, Noah saw light ahead. The passage emerged in a small grotto about half a mile from where he'd left Echo. He could hear helicopters circling nearby and men shouting commands. Fear gripped him. Had they found Echo? Was she safe? He needed to get back to her, but Westland personnel were between him and the cave entrance. A soft nickering sound from behind a nearby boulder nearly made Noah cry with relief. Echo stood there, somehow having found her way to his exit point. The mare seemed unharmed, though her ears were pinned back with obvious anxiety. Noah ran to her, hugging her neck tightly. "You found me," he whispered. "But how?" There was no time to ponder this mystery. The sound of approaching voices forced them into motion. Noah mounted quickly, and Echo took off at a gallop, racing away from the weeping rocks toward a maze of smaller canyons to the north. They traveled for hours, Echo seeming tireless despite the brutal pace. Whenever helicopters appeared overhead, the mare found shelter under overhangs or within narrow ravines. By late afternoon, they had put significant distance between themselves and their pursuers. Echo finally slowed as they entered a secluded box canyon with steep walls and a small spring bubbling from the rock. The horse was lathered with sweat, sides heaving from exertion. "You need rest," Noah told her, dismounting and guiding her to the spring. As Echo drank, Noah examined the items he'd recovered from the cave. The journal contained detailed instructions for accessing and activating various parts of the water system. The maps showed the entire network, including locations Westland had tapped for their illegal diversion. The USB drive was the most modern element, containing Miguel's documentation of Westland's activities, including photographs, water quality tests, and most damning of all, internal company emails discussing the deliberate creation of drought conditions to force land sales. Noah also examined the clay vessel, carefully breaking the wax seal. Inside were seeds, dozens of varieties according to the accompanying note of desert plants known for their water purification and retention properties. Plants that could help heal the land once water was restored. Dad thought of everything, Noah murmured, carefully repacking the items. The sun began to set, painting the canyon walls in brilliant oranges and reds. Noah built a small fire, more for comfort than warmth in the still hot desert evening. Echo grazed nearby on sparse desert grasses, recovering her strength. As darkness fell, Noah found himself speaking aloud, addressing his father as if he might somehow hear. "I found what you were protecting, Dad. I understand now why it was so important to you, why you risked everything." His voice grew stronger with each word. "I'm going to finish what you started. I'm going to stop Westland and bring the water back." Echo approached, settling beside him near the fire. Noah leaned against her warm side, drawing comfort from her solid presence. "We should head back to Moon Village tomorrow," Noah told her. "Ahode will know what to do with these." Echo's ears suddenly pricked forward, her body tensing. A moment later, Noah heard it too. Footsteps approaching the canyon entrance. He quickly extinguished the fire and gathered his pack, looking for an escape route. But the box canyon had only one entrance, now blocked by whoever was approaching. Echo moved protectively in front of Noah, facing the canyon entrance. In the moonlight, a silhouette appeared, a man alone moving cautiously. "Noah!" The voice was unfamiliar, yet somehow not threatening. "Noah Rivera. It's Robert Rivers. I'm a friend of your father's." Noah remained silent, suspicious. Echo, however, reacted differently. After a moment's hesitation, she nickered softly in what seemed like recognition. The man approached slowly, hands visible to show he was unarmed. As he came closer, Noah could make out his features, the same man he'd seen in town talking with Frank Sullivan. "Echo knows me," Robert said gently. "Your father and I rescued her together years ago." The horse moved forward, meeting Robert halfway. He placed a hand on her neck, murmuring something too quiet for Noah to hear. "How did you find us?" Noah finally asked, still wary. "Frank Sullivan helped me track you. He's watching the canyon entrance to make sure we weren't followed." Robert kept his distance, respecting Noah's caution. "Your mother and grandfather are searching for you too. Everyone's worried." "Are you really with Westland?" Noah challenged. Robert nodded slowly. "Yes, but not the way it appears. Your father asked me to work from the inside, gathering evidence of their illegal activities. I've been playing a double role for 2 years." "Prove it," Noah demanded. Robert reached slowly into his jacket, removing a photograph. He held it out to Noah, who approached cautiously to examine it. The image showed a younger Miguel and Robert standing together beside a much younger Echo, both men smiling broadly with arms around each other's shoulders. They looked like brothers despite their different ethnicities. "Your father saved my life in these canyons," Robert explained. "We became blood brothers in the Hopi tradition. When he discovered what Westland was doing, he came to me for help." Noah studied the man's face, looking for deception. "If you're his friend, why didn't you help us after he died? Mom had to sell almost everything. We were alone." Pain flashed across Robert's features. "I had to maintain my cover. If Westland suspected I was working against them, all of Miguel's efforts would have been for nothing?" He paused. "It was the hardest decision I've ever made, staying away when you and Elena needed help. I've regretted it every day." Echo nudged Noah gently, as if encouraging him to trust this man. The horse's judgment had proven reliable so far. "Did you find the chest?" Robert asked quietly. Noah nodded, patting his pack. "Dad's evidence is all here. The journal, the maps, everything." Relief washed over Robert's face. "Then we have what we need to stop them. But we need to move quickly. Drake has called in additional personnel. They're sweeping every canyon in the area." "I need to get these to Moon Village," Noah said. "A Hote will know what to do with the ancient knowledge." Robert looked surprised. "You found Moon Village. Few outsiders have ever seen it." "Echo took me there," Noah explained. "But Westland might have found it too. I saw their helicopters near the entrance yesterday." Concern darkened Robert's expression. "Then we need to warn them. The village has remained hidden for generations. If Westland discovers it, a sharp whistle from the canyon entrance interrupted him. Frank Sullivan appeared, gesturing urgently. Company coming, he called in a harsh whisper. At least 6 men heavily armed. Robert turned to Noah. Is there another way out of this canyon? Noah shook his head, fear returning. It's a box canyon. Only one entrance. Robert's expression hardened with resolve. Then I'll create a diversion. You and Echo follow Frank. He knows a safe route to the reservation where your grandfather and the elders are gathered. What about you? Noah asked. I'll catch up, Robert replied, though his tone lacked conviction. The important thing is getting that evidence to safety. It's what your father would want. Echo moved between them, nudging Robert with her muzzle before turning to Noah, clearly indicating he should mount. Noah hesitated only briefly before climbing onto Echo's back. Be careful, he told Robert. Dad would want that too. Robert nodded, squeezing Noah's shoulder once before turning toward the canyon entrance, drawing his handgun. Wait Noah called softly. Why are you helping us? You're a Rivers. Your family's part of Westland. Robert looked back, his expression solemn. Because some covenants transcend business interests. My father forgot that. I won't make the same mistake. Frank appeared beside them, leading his own horse. We need to move now, boy. Your mother's waiting at the meeting point. Noah followed Frank toward a narrow cleft in the canyon wall, barely visible in the moonlight, but just wide enough for horses to pass through single file. Behind them, Robert moved toward the main entrance, firing several shots into the air and shouting to draw attention. The diversion worked. As Noah and Frank slipped through the hidden passage, they heard men rushing toward Robert's position, voices raised in alarm. Will he be okay? Noah asked as they emerged on the other side, urging Echo to keep pace with Frank's horse. Frank's expression was grim. Robert Rivers is making amends for a lot of years of looking the other way. That kind of debt doesn't come cheap. They rode through the night, Frank leading them through a bewildering maze of canyons and dry washes. Echo followed without hesitation, seeming to trust the old rancher implicitly. As dawn broke, they reached a ridge overlooking a secluded valley. Below, Noah could see several vehicles and a small group of people gathered around a campfire, his mother among them. Noah! Elena cried, spotting them immediately. She ran up the slope as Noah dismounted, catching him in a fierce embrace. Thank God you're safe. Noah returned her hug with equal intensity, suddenly aware of how much he'd missed her. Mom, I found it. I found what Dad was looking for. Elena held him at arm's length, examining him with tear-filled eyes. You're talking, she whispered in astonishment. You're actually talking. Noah nodded, glancing at Echo, who stood nearby. She helped me find my voice again. Joseph approached more slowly, his weathered face, showing both relief and deep respect as he looked between his grandson and the sand-colored mare. The water-finding horse chose well, he said quietly. Welcome back, Noah. The moment of reunion was short-lived. Sheriff Madison approached with urgent news. Westland has deployed their full security force throughout the canyons. They've cut off road access to town and are preventing anyone from entering or leaving the area. What about Robert? Noah asked. Did he make it out? Frank shook his head grimly. No word yet, but he knew the risks. Noah opened his pack, showing the assembled group what he'd recovered from the ancestors' cave. This is everything we need to stop Westland and restore the water. Dad's evidence plus the ancient knowledge of how the water system works. Joseph examined the journal and maps with reverence. Our ancestors were brilliant engineers. They created a sustainable water management system centuries before modern science understood such concepts. And Westland has been deliberately sabotaging it, Elena added, scrolling through files on the USB drive with her tablet. This is irrefutable evidence of criminal activity. Sheriff Madison studied the documents. I've called in federal authorities, but with Westland blocking access, it could be days before they reach us. We don't have days, Joseph warned. If Drake realizes we have this evidence, he'll accelerate their operation. They might destroy key components of the water system to cover their tracks. Elena looked up sharply. Or worse, they might target Moon Village. If they've discovered its location, Noah's face paled. Luna, Ahote, all the others. They're in danger. A distant explosion punctuated his words, the sound echoing across the canyons. Smoke rose from the direction of the weeping rocks. "They're destroying evidence," Frank said grimly, "blasting the cave entrances." Noah turned to Echo, who was already moving restlessly, clearly agitated by the explosion. "We have to warn Moon Village," he said with sudden determination. "Echo can lead us there faster than any other route." "It's too dangerous," Elena protested. "Westland has armed men everywhere. They won't be expecting us to head toward them," Noah countered. "And Echo knows paths they can't possibly find." Joseph studied his grandson, seeing something new in the boy, a strength and purpose that hadn't been there before. "He's right. The horse can protect him better than we can." Elena looked torn, maternal fear warring with the recognition that her son had changed during his desert journey. "I'm coming with you," she finally said. Noah shook his head. "Echo can't carry both of us fast enough, and you need to get Dad's evidence to safety." Before Elena could protest further, Frank intervened. "The boy's right. Our priority has to be protecting that evidence and getting it to the authorities. It's what Miguel died for." Joseph approached Noah, placing his hands on the boy's shoulders. "I will perform the protection ceremony. It will help shield you and Echo on your journey." As Joseph conducted the brief ritual, marking Noah's forehead with a mixture of sacred herbs and spring water, the others prepared to split into two groups. Most would head for the reservation boundary where federal authorities could meet them, while Noah would return to Moon Village with Echo. Elena embraced her son one last time, her eyes filled with both fear and pride. "Be careful. I can't lose you too." "You won't," Noah promised. "Echo will protect me." As he mounted the mare, Joseph handed him a small pouch. "Water from the sacred spring. You may need it when you reach the village." Noah secured the pouch, then looked down at the assembled group, his mother, grandfather, Frank Sheriff Madison, and the others who had come searching for him. "I'll meet you at the reservation boundary by sunset," he told them, "with or without the villagers." Echo needed no guidance. As soon as Noah was settled on her back, she turned and galloped toward the distant canyons, her stride powerful and sure. Behind them, Elena watched until they disappeared from sight. "He's so much like his father," she whispered. "Yes," Joseph agreed. "But he's also himself." The horse recognized that strength in him even when he couldn't speak. As Noah and Echo raced toward Moon Village, the distant sound of helicopters echoed across the canyon lands. Westland was mobilizing its full force, determined to secure what they'd sought for years. But they weren't counting on a boy who had found his voice, a horse that remembered ancient paths and a covenant formed in blood generations ago. Echo carried Noah swiftly through the maze of canyons, somehow knowing exactly where Westland personnel were positioned and avoiding them with uncanny precision. Whenever they encountered blockades or search parties, the mare found alternate routes. Narrow ledges, hidden ravines, passages that seemed to appear and disappear like desert mirages. By midday, they approached the hidden entrance to Moon Village. Noah immediately sensed something was wrong. The usual feeling of peace and protection that surrounded the village entrance was absent, replaced by an ominous silence. Echo stopped, refusing to enter the narrow crevice that led to the village. Her ears flicked nervously, nostrils flared. "They're inside, aren't they?" Noah whispered. The mare pawed the ground in apparent confirmation. Noah slid from Echo's back, considering his options. He couldn't leave the villagers to Westland's mercies, but charging in blindly would be foolish. "We need to see what we're dealing with," he decided, moving toward a narrow chimney in the rock that Joseph had once shown him, a hidden observation point that overlooked the village. Climbing carefully, Noah reached a small opening that provided a clear view of Moon Village below. What he saw made his blood run cold. Westland personnel had taken control of the village. Armed men stood guard while Drake himself paced in the central plaza, interrogating Ahote. The other villagers, including Luna, were gathered under guard near the main spring. Most disturbing of all was the presence of Mayor Harmon, who appeared to be working alongside Drake, pointing out features of the village's water system to Westland technicians. Noah couldn't hear what was being said, but the body language was clear. Threats were being made, and the village elders were refusing to cooperate. As he watched, Drake grew increasingly agitated, finally striking Ahote across the face. The elderly man fell but was helped up by Luna, who glared defiantly at Drake. Noah retreated from his vantage point, mind racing. He couldn't take on armed men alone yet. He couldn't abandon the villagers either. Returning to Echo, he stroked her neck thoughtfully. "We need help," he murmured. but everyone who could help is heading for the reservation. Echo nickered softly, turning her head toward the distant weeping rocks where smoke still rose from Westland's explosives. Robert, Noah questioned, you think he might have survived? The horse bobbed her head in what seemed like affirmation. Noah hesitated only briefly before mounting again. Let's find him, he decided. If anyone knows Westland's weaknesses, it's Robert. Echo set off immediately, seeming to understand the urgency. They traveled rapidly, the mare choosing a route that kept them concealed from Westland patrols. As they approached the weeping rocks, Noah saw the devastation Westland had caused. Several cave entrances had been sealed with explosives, presumably to hide evidence of their activities. Echo slowed, picking her way carefully through the debris. She seemed to be tracking something, her head low to the ground, following a scent only she could detect. Near a partially collapsed cave entrance, the mare stopped pawing insistently at a pile of rubble. Noah dismounted, beginning to clear away stones and dirt. To his shock, he uncovered a hand, then an arm. Digging more frantically, he revealed Robert Rivers unconscious but alive, half buried in the collapse. "Robert, can you hear me?" Noah patted the man's face gently. Robert's eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on Noah. "The boy," he mumbled. "You got away." "Thanks to you," Noah confirmed, continuing to clear debris. "Can you move?" Robert winced, attempting to sit up. "Legs broken. Maybe some ribs, too. Drake's men left me for dead when they set the charges." Noah helped him to a sitting position. "Westland has taken Moon Village? They're threatening the people there?" This news seemed to energize Robert. "We can't let Drake get what he's after. If he forces them to reveal the central water controls." "What exactly is he looking for?" Noah asked, offering his canteen. Robert drank gratefully before answering. "The ancient water system has a central control mechanism, something the original builders created that can redirect the entire flow. Westland has been tapping individual channels, but with the central controls, they could essentially own all water rights for the entire region. And the villagers know where this control is." Robert nodded grimly. "A Hote is the current keeper of that knowledge. Drake will do whatever it takes to extract it from him." Noah looked around desperately. "We need to stop them, but how? It's just us against armed men." Robert's expression shifted, a hint of his corporate strategist persona emerging despite his injuries. "Sometimes the best weapon isn't force, but knowledge. Help me up. If I can get to my satellite phone, we can still turn this around." With Noah's assistance, Robert managed to stand, leaning heavily on the boy for support. "Can your horse carry double?" he asked, eyeing Echo dubiously. The mare approached, lowering herself slightly as if inviting them to mount. "I think that's a yes," Noah said with the ghost of a smile. With difficulty, they both mounted Echo. Noah in front, Robert holding on behind his injured leg, awkwardly positioned. "Head for the North Ridge," Robert directed. "I have equipment cached there. Communication gear Westland doesn't know about." Echo set off at a careful pace, mindful of her double load and Robert's injuries. As they traveled, Robert explained his plan. "Drake thinks he's destroyed all the evidence, but he doesn't know about the backup systems I put in place. If we can activate the satellite uplink, we can broadcast Miguel's evidence to every news outlet and government agency simultaneously." "Will that stop them in time?" Noah asked doubtfully. "Not by itself," Robert admitted, "but it will trigger a protocol I established with trusted contacts in federal agencies. They've been waiting for this signal." When they reached the ridge, Robert directed Noah to a seemingly natural rock formation. "Behind that false boulder, security panel responds to my fingerprint." Noah helped Robert approach the boulder, which swung open at his touch, to reveal sophisticated communications equipment. Robert worked quickly despite his injuries, activating systems and entering complex codes. "Uploading all files now," he murmured. "Full broadcast in 3 minutes." A helicopter suddenly appeared over the ridge, hovering menacingly. Drake's voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "That's far enough, the Rivers step away from the equipment." Robert pushed Noah behind him protectively. "Get on Echo. Go." "I'm not leaving you again," Noah insisted. "This isn't about me," Robert said urgently. "The broadcast is uploading, but someone needs to activate the final sequence from the Ancestors' Cave. There's a backup control that can override Westland's diversions and restore the natural flow." The helicopter descended, armed men preparing to fast rope down. Echo knows the way to the secondary entrance, Robert continued. The one I showed your father years ago. Take this. He pressed a small device into Noah's hand. Activation key. It will unlock the control panel in the lower chamber. Noah hesitated, torn between staying to help Robert and completing the mission. Go, Robert insisted. Finish what your father started. It's what he would want. What I want. Echo moved beside them, clearly agitated by the helicopter, but standing firm. Noah embraced Robert briefly. I'll come back for you, he promised. I know you will, kid. Robert managed a pained smile. Now go save your village. Noah mounted Echo, who immediately bolted away from the ridge, just as men began descending from the helicopter. Behind them, Noah heard shouting and what might have been gunshots, but Echo didn't slow, carrying him swiftly away from danger and toward their final destination. The mare seemed to know exactly where to go, following a route that eventually brought them to a hidden cleft near the base of the Weeping Rocks, an entrance Noah hadn't seen before, partially concealed by desert vegetation. Echo stopped, indicating Noah should dismount. The opening was small, barely large enough for a person to squeeze through. Another entrance you can't fit through? Noah observed sadly. You've brought me this far, but I have to go the rest alone, don't I? Echo nudged him gently, her intelligent eyes somehow conveying both encouragement and farewell. Noah hugged her neck tightly. Thank you, he whispered, for everything, for helping me find my voice again. The mare nickered softly, pressing her muzzle against Noah's chest one last time before stepping back. Taking a deep breath, Noah clutched the activation key Robert had given him and entered the narrow passage, leaving Echo standing guard outside. The tunnel descended steeply, twisting through the rock in a disorienting spiral. Unlike the main entrance, this passage showed signs of modern modification. Metal supports in places, electrical conduit running along one wall. Eventually, the passage opened into a chamber Noah recognized. The same blue pool he'd discovered earlier, though viewed from a different angle. The wooden chest was gone, likely destroyed by Westland, but the altar-like stone structure remained. Robert's instructions echoed in Noah's mind. He approached the altar, examining it carefully. Near its base, partially hidden by a projection of rock, he found what he was looking for. A small panel of stone that moved aside to reveal a modern interface incongruously high-tech in this ancient setting. Noah inserted the activation key. The panel illuminated, displaying a complex schematic of the entire water system, a digital representation of the maps he'd seen in the wooden chest. Red indicators showed where Westland had installed diversion equipment, interrupting the natural flow. A central control point pulsed with blue light, the master mechanism Robert had mentioned. Noah studied the interface, trying to understand the activation sequence. His fingers hovered over the controls, uncertainty gripping him. One wrong move might damage the system irreparably. A soft blue glow suddenly suffused the chamber, reflected from the pool. The water surface rippled, though there was no breeze. As Noah watched in astonishment, a figure seemed to form in the ripples. Indistinct at first, then resolving into a familiar shape. Dad, Noah whispered, hardly daring to believe. The watery image didn't speak, but it moved toward the control panel, a transparent hand indicating a specific sequence of inputs. Noah hesitated only briefly before following the guidance, pressing the indicated controls in sequence. The schematic responded immediately, blue light flowing through previously blocked channels as the diversions were systematically overridden. A low rumbling vibrated through the cavern. The pool's glow intensified, and the water level began to rise noticeably. The watery figure nodded once in apparent satisfaction before dissolving back into ripples. Thank you, Noah whispered, unsure if he was addressing his father's spirit, the cave itself, or some deeper intelligence within the ancient system. The rumbling increased as water began flowing more forcefully through long-dormant channels. Noah realized he needed to exit quickly before the rising water blocked his escape route. He hurried back up the spiral passage, the sound of rushing water growing louder behind him. As he emerged from the hidden entrance, he found Echo waiting exactly where he'd left her, seemingly unperturbed by the growing tremors beneath their feet. Noah mounted quickly. We need to get to Moon Village, he told her. Fast. Echo needed no further encouragement. She set off at a gallop somehow, finding secure footing despite the increasingly unstable ground. Behind them, water began seeping from cracks in the rock face. Not in destructive torrents, but in steady controlled flows that quickly formed streams running down ancient channels, long dry. As they approached Moon Village, Noah saw Westland personnel in disarray. Men ran from the hidden entrance shouting in confusion as water began emerging from supposedly dry springs throughout the canyon. Echo picked her way past the chaos, bringing Noah to a vantage point overlooking the village. Below, he could see Drake gesturing furiously at technicians who were frantically checking equipment. Mayor Harmon looked terrified, backing away from what was clearly becoming a dangerous situation. Most importantly, Noah saw the villagers taking advantage of the confusion, Ahote leading them toward a hidden exit, while their captors were distracted. The ground trembled more violently. Not an earthquake, Noah realized, but the ancient system reawakening. Channels filling reservoirs, rising the land coming alive again after years of artificial drought. As he watched a particularly powerful surge of water erupted from the village's central spring, knocking several Westland men off their feet, Drake, seeing his operation literally washing away, made a desperate move toward Ahote, drawing a handgun. Without thinking, Noah urged Echo forward. The mare leaped from their vantage point, landing with impossible grace in the village plaza between Drake and the retreating villagers. "Stop!" Noah shouted, his voice stronger and more commanding than he'd ever heard it. Drake turned, his face contorted with rage when he recognized the boy. What have you done?" "Restored what you tried to steal," Noah replied, sitting tall on Echo's back. "The water belongs to everyone, not just Westland Corporation." Drake raised his gun, aiming directly at Noah. "You've ruined everything, you little—" He never finished the sentence. A stream of water burst from the ground directly beneath him, throwing him backward and sending his weapon flying. All around the village, water continued emerging, not destructively, but with purpose, following ancient channels designed to distribute it evenly. Luna broke away from the retreating villagers, running to Noah's side. "You activated the old system," she exclaimed. "Ahote said it could be done, but no one has managed it for generations." "Not just me," Noah said, glancing at Echo. "We had help." Drake struggled to his feet, soaked and furious. "This isn't over," he snarled. "Westland has resources you can't imagine." "Actually, it is over," came a new voice. Sheriff Madison appeared at the village entrance, accompanied by several deputies and stern-looking men in federal law enforcement jackets. "Drake Matthews, you're under arrest for multiple violations of federal water rights laws, criminal conspiracy, and about a dozen other charges we'll sort out later." As Drake was restrained, Madison approached Noah. "Robert Rivers' transmission went through. Federal authorities have moved in on Westland's operations across 3 states. Your father's evidence was comprehensive." "Is Robert okay?" Noah asked anxiously. Madison's expression softened. "He's injured but alive. Helicopters taking him to the hospital in Phoenix right now." Mayor Harmon tried to slip away during the commotion, but Frank Sullivan intercepted him. "Going somewhere, Harmon? I think the feds have some questions about your partnership with Westland." As law enforcement secured the scene, Elena and Joseph arrived, rushing to Noah's side. "You did it," Elena said, embracing her son. "You actually did it." Joseph looked around in wonder as water continued to flow, bringing life back to parched ground. "The ancient system is rebalancing. It will take time, but the natural order is being restored." Ahote approached, his face bruised but his eyes bright with triumph. "The water-finding horse chose well," he said, bowing slightly to Echo. "And the son has completed what the father began." Noah dismounted, suddenly feeling the weight of everything that had happened. "I couldn't have done any of it without Echo," he said, stroking the mare's neck gratefully. As if in response, Echo raised her head, looking toward the canyon entrance. A distant whinny echoed across the rocks, answered immediately by Echo. "Her family is calling," Ahote observed. "She has fulfilled her purpose. Now she must return to them." Noah felt a sharp pang of sadness at the thought of Echo leaving. The horse had become more than a guide. She had been his voice when he couldn't speak, his courage when he was afraid, his connection to the father he'd lost. "She needs to be free," he acknowledged, his voice thick with emotion. Echo lowered her head, pressing her muzzle against Noah's chest one last time. For a brief moment, Noah thought he felt his father's presence again. Not as a ghostly apparition, but as a warmth that flowed between himself, Echo, and the newly awakened waters of the desert. "Thank you," he whispered, placing his forehead against Echo's. I won't forget. With a final soft nicker, Echo turned and trotted toward the canyon entrance. At the threshold, she paused, looking back once, as if to ensure Noah would be all right without her. Go! Noah called, his voice breaking slightly. Your family needs you. The mare bobbed her head once, then galloped away, disappearing into the golden light of the setting sun. Elena put her arm around Noah's shoulders. You'll see her again, she said softly. Some bonds can't be broken by distance. As they watched the spot where Echo had vanished, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Water continued to flow through Moon Village, the sound like music after years of silence. Noah felt changed, no longer the mute, grief-stricken boy he had been just days ago. The desert journey had healed something in him that therapy and time alone could not. Dad would be proud, he said quietly. He is proud, Joseph corrected. The dead walk beside us always. Miguel's spirit is strong here. Noah nodded, remembering the watery figure in the cave. Some things defied rational explanation, but felt true nonetheless. As the stars multiplied overhead, Noah knew that one chapter of his life had closed, but another was just beginning. There would be challenges ahead, restoring Dust Valley, rebuilding what drought and corporate greed had damaged, helping his mother heal, as he had begun to heal himself. But for now, in this moment, it was enough to stand with his family, feeling the presence of his father in the newly awakened waters, knowing that somewhere in the desert night, Echo ran free with her herd, the crescent moon mark on her chest gleaming silver in the starlight. 3 months had passed since the day water returned to Dust Valley. The transformation was subtle at first. Small springs emerging in long, dry creek beds, the water table slowly rising in wells that had been abandoned. Nature responded with cautious optimism. Desert plants unfurled dormant seeds, waiting patiently for generations beneath the parched soil. Noah stood on the ridge overlooking the town, now officially returning to its original name, Green Valley. The municipal council had voted unanimously for the change, a symbolic gesture marking a new beginning. Amazing what a little water can do, Frank Sullivan remarked, joining Noah at the lookout point. The old rancher seemed rejuvenated, his weathered face more animated than it had been in years. Not just water, Noah replied. People working together. Below them, a community restoration project was in full swing. Residents from both town and reservation worked side by side, planting native species along newly flowing waterways, guided by Joseph and the Hopi elders. The seeds from the clay vessel found in the ancestors' cave had proven remarkably viable despite their age. Your mother's looking for you, Frank said. Something about the ceremony tonight. Noah nodded, taking a final look at the activity below before turning to follow Frank down the trail. In the months since activating the ancient water system, Noah had grown both physically and emotionally. His voice had returned completely, though he remained more thoughtful and measured with his words than most 12-year-olds. Have you visited Robert recently? Frank asked as they walked. Yesterday, Noah replied. The doctors say he'll be able to come home next week. His leg is healing well, but he'll need a cane for a while. Robert Rivers had spent weeks in the hospital recovering from his injuries. The federal investigation into Westland had revealed the full extent of his undercover work, exonerating him from any wrongdoing. In fact, his meticulous documentation had been instrumental in building the government's case against Drake Mayor Harmon and Westland's senior executives. He's buying the old Peterson Ranch, Frank mentioned casually. Plans to restore it using sustainable methods. Noah glanced at Frank, noting the approval in the old rancher's voice. The animosity between Frank and the Rivers family had gradually transformed into an unlikely alliance. Mom's helping him design the water management system, Noah said. She says it could become a model for the whole region. They arrived at the Rivera home, now a hub of activity as Elena had converted it into an impromptu research center. Scientists from several universities had arrived to study the ancient water system, marveling at its sophisticated engineering. Elena, reinstated at her former research position with a substantial grant, led the team documenting and learning from the indigenous technology. There you are, Elena called as Noah entered. She was surrounded by maps and water flow diagrams, her hair pulled back haphazardly, eyes bright with purpose. The ceremonial clothes Joseph brought are in your room. We need to leave for the reservation in an hour. Noah nodded, slipping past researchers debating aquifer measurements to reach his bedroom. On his bed lay traditional Hopi ceremonial attire alongside more contemporary clothes. Joseph had been clear that Noah should choose what felt right to him, honoring both sides of his heritage. As Noah changed, his gaze fell on the wooden amulet a Hoti had given him, the carved horse with the crescent moon. He hadn't seen Echo since that evening when she returned to her herd. Sometimes he thought he glimpsed a sand-colored shape on distant ridges, but she never came close enough to be certain. The amulet, however, occasionally grew warm against his skin for no apparent reason. Joseph said it meant Echo was thinking of him, though whether this was literal truth or metaphorical comfort, Noah wasn't sure. Either way, it brought him peace. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. Joseph entered, already dressed in his ceremonial attire. At 72, the elder Rivera carried himself with dignity that transcended age. "Have you decided what to wear?" he asked, noticing Noah's indecision. Noah gestured to the clothing options. "I'm not sure which is right." Joseph smiled. "There is no right or wrong here, grandson. Tonight is about honoring all that you are. Hopi wisdom and River's determination, your mother's science, and your father's passion. Choose what feels true to you." Noah considered this, then began selecting elements from both sets of clothing. Traditional Hopi shirt with contemporary pants, ceremonial moccasins, and a modern jacket. The combination felt right, a physical representation of his dual heritage. "Perfect," Joseph approved. "Miguel would be proud." "Do you really think he can see me?" Noah asked, voicing a question that had lingered since his experience in the cave. Joseph placed a hand on Noah's shoulder. "The Hopi believe our ancestors never truly leave us. They become part of the world around us. The water, the wind, the earth itself. Your father's spirit is in the waters he fought to protect, in the land he loved, and most importantly in you." Noah nodded, fingers automatically touching the amulet. "I keep hoping Echo will come back just once, so I can tell her about everything that's happened." "Some bonds don't require words," Joseph replied. "The water-finding horse knows what you've accomplished. Your paths crossed for a purpose, and that purpose was fulfilled." They joined Elena in the main room where she was finalizing preparations for the evening's ceremony. The federal investigation had concluded its initial phase, and tonight's gathering would mark an official new beginning for both the town and the reservation. "Everyone ready?" Elena asked, looking up from her notes. She paused, seeing Noah in his carefully chosen attire. "You look so grown up," she said softly. "So much like your father." Noah smiled, accepting the comparison without the pain it would have caused months ago. "I'm ready." The ceremonial grounds on the reservation were illuminated by dozens of torches, casting warm light over the gathering crowd. Both reservation residents and townspeople mingled together, a unity that would have seemed impossible before the water crisis brought their common interests into focus. Luna spotted Noah, immediately rushing over to greet him. Like Noah, she had matured in the months since their adventure. As the granddaughter of a Hote, she had taken on responsibilities in teaching younger children about the ancient water wisdom. "You're late," she teased. A Hote was about to send a search party. "Mom had to finish her presentation," Noah explained, gesturing to where Elena was setting up display boards showing the restored water system. Luna linked her arm through his, leading him toward the central gathering area. "Everyone's here, even Robert Rivers. They brought him from the hospital specially for tonight." Sure enough, Robert sat in a place of honor near the elders' circle, his injured leg propped on a cushion. Despite his still recovering state, he looked more at peace than Noah had ever seen him, as if a lifetime's burden had been lifted. Nearby, Frank Sullivan was deep in conversation with Grace Martinez and other town elders. Sheriff Madison stood with several federal officials who had remained to oversee the transition and restoration efforts. The atmosphere was celebratory but also solemn, a community acknowledging both what had been lost and what had been gained. A Hote raised his ceremonial staff, and conversations quieted as people took their places for the ceremony. Noah was directed to sit between Joseph and Robert, symbolic positioning that wasn't lost on anyone present. "Tonight we honor the restoration of balance." A Hote began, his voice carrying clearly across the gathering. "Water returns to our lands through the wisdom of our ancestors and the courage of those who fought to protect it." The ceremony combined traditional Hopi rituals with contemporary acknowledgments. Federal officials formally announced the establishment of a protected water trust that would ensure neither government nor private interests could again exploit the region's resources. The ancient water system would be cooperatively managed by a council representing both town and reservation. When it came time for Noah's role in the ceremony, Ahoti beckoned him forward. Noah Rivera carries two bloodlines that were destined to protect our waters. Just as was foretold generations ago, he was guided by the water-finding horse to restore what had been damaged. Noah stepped forward, suddenly nervous under the community's collective gaze. Ahote handed him a small clay vessel filled with water from the sacred spring. "Pour this into the circle," the elder instructed. "As you do, speak your wish for our future." Noah took the vessel with both hands, stepping to the center of the ceremonial circle where a shallow basin had been prepared. As he tilted the vessel, watching clear water flow into the basin, he spoke from his heart. "I wish for us to remember that water connects all living things. It doesn't recognize boundaries between town and reservation, between different peoples or beliefs. Water teaches us that we're part of something larger than ourselves." A murmur of approval rippled through the gathering as Noah returned to his place. Elena smiled at him with unmistakable pride. Robert Rivers was next assisted to the center by Frank Sullivan in a gesture of reconciliation that symbolized the community's healing. Despite his injuries, Robert insisted on standing unassisted for his part of the ceremony. "My family made a covenant generations ago." He began, his voice steady despite his obvious pain. "James Rivers and Talassi swore to protect the waters together. That promise was forgotten by those who came after, including myself, for too long." He poured his own vessel of water into the basin, watching it mingle with what Noah had added. "I renew that covenant today," Robert continued. "The Rivers family will once again stand with the Hopi as guardians, not exploiters. The trust fund I've established will ensure the water system's protection for generations to come." This announcement drew surprised murmurs. Robert had not previously revealed his intention to commit his considerable personal fortune to the cause. As the ceremony continued, Joseph leaned close to Noah. "Listen," he whispered. Noah strained his ears, unsure what his grandfather meant. Then he heard it, distant but unmistakable, the sound of horses' hooves approaching the ceremonial grounds. Others heard it too. Conversations faltered as heads turned toward the sound. From the darkness beyond the torchlight emerged several riders on horseback. Luna's father and other Hopi men who had been patrolling the reservation boundaries. But they weren't alone. Behind them, barely visible in the torchlight, moved a small herd of wild horses, and at their head, unmistakable even in the dim light, was Echo, her sand-colored coat seeming to glow, the crescent mark on her chest clearly visible. Noah rose instinctively, heart pounding. The ceremonial circle parted as the mare stepped forward, moving with deliberate dignity until she stood before Noah. "She's come to witness the covenant renewal," Ahoti said softly. "The water-finding horse remembers what humans sometimes forget." Echo lowered her head, pressing her muzzle gently against Noah's chest directly over his heart. The wooden amulet grew warm against his skin. "Hello, old friend," Noah whispered, stroking her neck. "I've missed you." The mare nickered softly, a sound that seemed to express both recognition and approval. Behind her, the wild herd remained at a respectful distance, alert but unafraid. Ahote approached slowly, carrying a small clay bowl of sacred water. "The final part of our ceremony," he explained, "the blessing of the covenant." He dipped his fingers in the water, marking Noah's forehead with a small crescent shape. To everyone's surprise, Echo lowered her head, allowing Ahote to place the same mark on her forehead. "The circle is complete," Ahote announced. "What was broken has been mended. What was forgotten has been remembered." Echo backed away slowly, rejoining her herd. As the wild horses turned to leave, she looked back once at Noah, a glance that conveyed more than words ever could. Then she was gone, leading her family back into the wilderness that was their home. The ceremony concluded with a community feast and celebration that continued late into the night. Noah found himself surrounded by well-wishers, townspeople and reservation residents alike, thanking him for his role in saving their community. Later, as the festivities wound down, Noah sat with Elena, Joseph, and Robert, watching the embers of the central fire. "What happens now?" Noah asked, the question directed at all of them, and none of them. "We rebuild," Elena said simply. We learn from what happened and create something better. We remember, Joseph added, both the ancient wisdom and the modern lessons. Robert nodded thoughtfully. And we prepare for the challenges ahead. What happened here could happen elsewhere. Water will be the most precious resource of this century. Noah considered their words, thinking of Echo and the wild horses returning to their desert home. We protect what matters, he concluded, together. As they sat in companionable silence, the first hints of dawn touched the eastern horizon. A new day for a community reborn through crisis, connected by the most fundamental element of life: water. 1 year later, Green Valley had transformed almost beyond recognition. The restoration efforts had accelerated natural regrowth, with carefully managed water distribution, bringing life back to areas long abandoned to drought. The town center featured a small fountain, modest in size but deeply symbolic, dedicated to Miguel Rivera and those who had fought to protect the region's water. Children played in the plaza that had once displayed water restriction, signs their laughter, a testament to renewed hope. Noah, now 13, had grown several inches taller. The quiet, withdrawn boy was gone, replaced by a thoughtful young man who carried himself with quiet confidence. He divided his time between school, where he excelled in science and environmental studies, and working with Joseph to document traditional Hopi water management techniques. On this particular morning, Noah stood with Elena and Robert outside the newly established Water Conservation Center, a joint project between the town, the reservation, and several universities. The center, housed in the renovated town hall, would serve as both research facility and educational institution. "Ready for the ribbon cutting?" Elena asked, adjusting the ceremonial scissors in her hands. As lead researcher, she would officially open the center alongside Robert, whose foundation had provided much of the funding. "Reporters are asking if you'll make a statement," Robert told Noah, leaning slightly on his cane. His injuries had healed well, though he still walked with a limp that doctors said might be permanent. Noah shook his head. "This is your moment, not mine." Despite his reluctance for publicity, Noah had become something of a local legend. Children asked for the horse story repeatedly, and visitors to the area often requested tours of the sites associated with what was now called the Water Awakening. The ceremony proceeded smoothly with speeches from Elena, Robert, and representatives from both town and reservation. Joseph performed a traditional blessing, and Sheriff Madison, recently elected as the new mayor after Harmon's disgrace and imprisonment, spoke about the community's renewed commitment to environmental stewardship. As the formal proceedings ended and the center opened its doors to the public, Noah slipped away from the crowd. He had another appointment to keep, one more personal and to him more important. Frank Sullivan waited at the trailhead with 2 saddled horses. "Right on time," the old rancher greeted him. "Perfect day for a ride." Noah mounted easily, having taken regular riding lessons from Frank over the past year. Though no horse could replace Echo in his heart, he had developed a good relationship with Starlight, a gentle black mare from Frank's stable. "Any sign of them?" Noah asked as they set out on the trail leading into the canyons. Frank shook his head. "Not this week, but the seasonal migration should bring them through Moon Valley soon." Their monthly rides to look for Echo's herd had become a ritual. Sometimes they spotted the wild horses from a distance. Occasionally, Echo would approach within 100 yards, acknowledging their presence before leading her family away. She never came as close as she had during that night at the ceremony, but Noah understood. She belonged to the wilderness now. As they rode, Noah noticed changes in the landscape. Small streams now flowed where there had been only dry washes a year ago. Native vegetation was returning, and with it wildlife that had abandoned the region during the worst of the drought. "Someone's been out this way," Frank observed, pointing to fresh tire tracks crossing the trail. "Recently, too." Noah frowned. "Researchers from the center." "Don't think so," Frank replied, dismounting to examine the tracks more closely. "These are heavy vehicles, all-terrain types." A sense of unease settled over Noah. The northwestern canyons were now part of a protected wilderness area, off limits to motorized vehicles except for authorized research or emergency purposes. "Should we report it?" he asked. Frank remounted, his expression troubled. "Let's follow them a bit first. See what we're dealing with." They altered their route, tracking the vehicle path as it wound deeper into the canyon system. The tire marks eventually led them to a disturbing sight, a makeshift camp established near one of the newly emerged springs with drilling equipment set up beside the water source. Three men in unmarked coveralls worked around the equipment, taking water samples and making notes. Their vehicles bore no identifying logos or government markings. Frank signaled for Noah to stay back, both of them concealing themselves behind a rock formation to observe. "That's industrial testing equipment," Frank whispered. "Looking for mineral content, not water quality." Noah's mind flashed back to what he'd learned from the ancient documents. The uranium deposits, he realized. The ones James Rivers and Talassi found. They're prospecting. Frank nodded grimly. With uranium prices rising globally, these remote deposits would be valuable. But any mining would threaten the entire water system. One of the men looked in their direction, causing both Noah and Frank to duck lower behind the rocks. "We need to leave," Frank murmured. "Report this to Madison and the federal authorities." They backed away carefully, leading their horses until they were far enough to mount without being noticed. As they prepared to ride back to town, a distant sound caught Noah's attention, the unmistakable nickering of horses. "Echoes heard," he whispered, pointing to a ridge where several wild horses had appeared silhouetted against the sky. The sand-colored mare stood slightly apart, her posture alert, as she surveyed the canyon below. Even at this distance, Noah could sense her agitation. The wild horses seemed to be monitoring the prospectors' activities just as Noah and Frank were. "She knows," Noah said with certainty. "She senses the threat to the water." Frank studied the horses thoughtfully. "They've always known. That's why the legends call them water-finding horses. They're connected to it somehow." As they watched, Echo led her herd away from the ridge, disappearing into the maze of canyons. Noah felt the wooden amulet grow warm against his skin, a sensation that had become familiar whenever Echo was near. "We need to warn everyone," Noah said, turning Starlight toward town. "If they start mining here, it could destroy everything we've worked to restore." They rode hard, reaching Green Valley by mid-afternoon. The Water Conservation Center was still busy with opening day visitors, but Noah pushed through the crowd to find Elena and Robert in conversation with several researchers. "Mom," he interrupted urgently. "We need to talk. Now." Elena recognized the seriousness in his tone immediately. "What's wrong?" "Prospectors," Frank explained as he joined them. "In the northwestern canyons, testing water and soil near the springs." Robert's expression darkened. "Uranium." "Most likely," Frank confirmed. "Professional operation, unmarked vehicles." Elena quickly ushered them into a private office where Frank and Noah described what they'd seen. Sheriff Madison was called in, along with Joseph and representatives from the federal agencies overseeing the protected area. "This land is supposed to be protected," Elena said angrily. "How could this happen?" Madison studied the map where Noah had marked the prospector's location. "That section falls into a regulatory gray area. The full protection orders haven't been finalized for the entire canyon system. Westland is gone, but there are plenty of other companies looking to exploit resources," Robert added. "I've heard rumors about international mining interests exploring the region. We need to stop them before they disturb the uranium deposits," Joseph said firmly. "If those minerals leach into the water system, we could face contamination across the entire aquifer." Noah described how Echo and her herd had been observing the prospectors. "She knows they're a threat. The horses have always protected the water." While the adults debated legal strategies and enforcement options, Noah slipped outside, needing space to think. The celebration of the center's opening had been instantly overshadowed by this new threat, a reminder that the battle to protect the waters was never truly won. He found Luna sitting by the small fountain in the plaza, her expression suggesting she already knew something was wrong. "You've seen them too, haven't you?" Noah asked, sitting beside her. Luna nodded. "The elders sensed a disturbance 3 days ago. Ahote has been performing ceremonies to seek guidance." "What did he learn?" "That the threat comes from beneath," Luna replied. "Not just the mining, but something deeper. The ancient balance is still fragile." Noah touched the wooden amulet, finding it unexpectedly warm, despite Echo being miles away. "I think the horses are trying to warn us." Echo appeared on the ridge, right above where the prospectors are working. Luna considered this. In the old stories, the water-finding horses always appeared before great changes, sometimes warnings of danger, sometimes guiding people to new beginnings. We need to understand what they're trying to tell us, Noah decided. Tonight I'm going back out there. Luna's eyes widened. Alone. No, Noah said, a plan forming in his mind. I need your help, and we'll need Joseph and Ahote too. By evening, Noah had gathered a small group committed to his plan. Luna, Joseph, Ahote, Frank, and reluctantly Elena, who insisted on accompanying her son despite her misgivings. This is reckless, she argued as they prepared supplies. We should wait for the federal authorities to investigate. Bureaucracy moves too slowly, Joseph countered. If those prospectors file claims, they could gain legal access to the area before protection orders are finalized. Antum. Noah checked his backpack, ensuring he had everything needed for their nighttime expedition. Water emergency supplies, and most importantly, the wooden amulet that connected him to Echo. I know she's trying to show us something, he explained to his mother. Every time I've felt the amulet warm up recently, it's been when I was thinking about the water sources in that exact area. Elena sighed, recognizing the determination in her son's expression. The same look Miguel had worn when pursuing something he believed in passionately. At least we're going together this time, she conceded. They set out after dark, traveling in Frank's truck as far as the old mining road would take them, then continuing on foot. Ahote led them along ancient trails known only to the Hopi, avoiding the routes the prospectors had used. The night was clear, a full moon illuminating their path through the canyons. Noah felt a growing sense of anticipation as they approached the area where he and Frank had spotted Echo's herd earlier. The prospectors' camp is just beyond that ridge, Frank whispered as they paused to rest. But I don't see any lights. They might have left for the night. Or they're operating in darkness for a reason, Elena suggested warily. Joseph and Ahote exchanged glances. There is another way to approach, Ahote said. Through Moon Valley. It would bring us above their position without exposing us. The group followed Ahote through a series of narrow passages that eventually opened into the hidden valley that housed Moon Village. The small Hopi settlement was quiet, most residents asleep, except for a few elders who had been expecting them. The horses passed through at sunset, one elder informed them. The sand mare led them toward the ancient pool. Luna gasped softly. The ancient pool hasn't held water in generations. Until now, Ahote confirmed. The reawakening of the water system has reached even the oldest reservoirs. They continued through Moon Village, following a steep path that led up the canyon wall. From this elevated position, they could see the prospectors' camp below, now illuminated by portable lights as the men worked through the night. They're drilling core samples, Elena observed, her scientific training allowing her to identify their activities. Testing mineral content at different depths. Noah's attention, however, was drawn elsewhere. The amulet against his chest had grown increasingly warm, almost hot to the touch. He scanned the surrounding ridges, searching for any sign of Echo and her herd. A soft nickering from above answered his unspoken question. Echo stood on a ledge overlooking both the prospectors and Noah's group, her sand-colored coat silvery in the moonlight. She pawed the ground insistently, then turned and disappeared over the ridge. She wants us to follow, Noah said with certainty, already moving toward the path that would lead to Echo's position. Noah, wait, Elena called, but her son was already climbing the steep trail, driven by an instinct he couldn't explain but trusted completely. The others followed, with Joseph and Ahote keeping pace surprisingly well despite their age. When they reached the ridge where Echo had stood, they found the mare waiting a short distance away, clearly visible in the moonlight. As Noah approached, Echo turned and began walking deliberately along the ridgeline, looking back occasionally to ensure they were following. Just like in the old stories, Ahote murmured, the water-finding horse leading the worthy to what they seek. Echo led them along the ridge for nearly a mile before descending into a narrow ravine that none of them, not even Joseph or Ahote, recognized. The path twisted between towering rock walls until it opened suddenly into a small, perfect circular valley. In the center of this hidden space lay a pool of water that glowed with the same ethereal blue light Noah had seen in the ancestors' cave. The surface rippled gently, though there was no breeze, and the air hummed with a subtle energy that raised goosebumps on Noah's arms. The ancient pool, Ahote whispered in awe. I never thought I would see it with my own eyes. Echo stood at the pool's edge, waiting. When Noah approached, she dipped her muzzle into the glowing water, then looked at him expectantly. Understanding intuitively, Noah knelt and touched the surface of the pool. The water felt strangely alive against his fingertips, almost electric. As ripples spread from his touch, images formed in the glowing liquid. Not reflections, but visions. Noah saw the underground water system as if from within a vast network of channels and reservoirs stretching for miles beneath the desert. He saw where the prospectors' drilling had already penetrated dangerously close to a uranium deposit, and how continued excavation would breach the protective rock layer, separating the toxic minerals from the pure water. Most alarmingly, he saw how the entire system was interconnected. Contamination at that single point would eventually poison water sources across the entire region, including Green Valley's newly restored supply. "We need to stop them," Noah said urgently, looking up at his companions. "Not tomorrow, not after legal appeals. Tonight." Echo nickered in apparent agreement, pawing the ground beside the pool. "But how?" Elena asked practically. "There are at least 6 men down there with heavy equipment. We can't simply ask them to leave." Ahote knelt beside the pool, observing the visions, still swirling in its depths. "The ancient pool offers more than knowledge," he said thoughtfully. "It offers options." Following his gaze, Noah saw new images forming, alternative water channels that could be activated, much as he had done in the ancestors' cave a year ago. The ancient engineers had built redundancies into their system, including emergency flows that could be triggered to protect the main aquifer. "We can divert the water," Noah realized, "create a temporary flood that would force them to evacuate without actually putting them in danger." Joseph studied the visions carefully. "It could work, but we'd need to access the control mechanism. It's in the secondary chamber of the ancestors' cave. The cave entrances were sealed after Westland's explosives," Frank reminded them. Echo snorted, stamping her hoof against a particular spot beside the pool. When Noah investigated, he found ancient symbols carved into the stone, the same patterns he had drawn obsessively after his father's death. "It's a map," Luna realized, kneeling beside him, "showing another entrance to the cave system." Noah traced the symbols with his finger, recognizing the pattern. "It's not far from here. Echo can lead us." Elena looked worried but determined. "If we do this, we need to be careful. Creating even a controlled flood could have unintended consequences." "The alternative is worse," Noah replied, standing to face his mother. "If they breach that uranium deposit, the water will be poisoned for generations." After brief deliberation, they agreed to follow Noah's plan. Echo led them from the ancient pool along another hidden path that wound through increasingly narrow canyons. The mare moved with absolute confidence, even in passages so dark they had to use flashlights to follow. Eventually, they reached what appeared to be a solid rock wall covered with desert varnish and centuries of mineral deposits. Echo pawed at its base, revealing a narrow opening that had been naturally concealed. "The hidden entrance," Joseph confirmed, recognizing symbols nearly invisible under layers of natural camouflage. Noah went first, squeezing through the tight opening that widened into a tunnel sloping gently downward. The others followed, with Frank bringing up the rear after ensuring Echo would be safe outside. "She'll wait," Noah assured them. "She always has." The tunnel eventually connected with the larger cave system, bringing them into a chamber Noah recognized. Not the main room with the blue pool, but a secondary chamber he had glimpsed during his first visit. Here, ancient technology merged with natural formations. What appeared to be ordinary stalagmites were actually sophisticated control mechanisms, their positions and relationships precisely engineered to manage water flow throughout the system. "This is remarkable," Elena whispered, her scientific mind immediately appreciating the ingenuity. "They created a hydraulic computer thousands of years ago." Ahote approached a central formation that resembled a stone table. Its surface was carved with a topographical map of the entire water system, certain points inlaid with materials that glowed faintly in the dim light. "The diversion controls," he explained. "Each point represents a junction where flow can be redirected." Following the visions from the ancient pool, Noah identified the specific controls they needed to adjust. Working together, they carefully shifted small stone markers on the map, each movement corresponding to actual changes in the physical system through some mechanism none of them fully understood. As they worked, a low rumbling began to vibrate through the cave. The sound of water moving through long dormant channels grew steadily louder. "It's working," Joseph confirmed, placing his hand on the wall to feel the vibrations. The emergency channels are filling. When the final adjustment was made, Ahote urged them toward the exit. We should return to the surface. The waters will rise quickly now. They retraced their path through the tunnel, emerging to find Echo waiting patiently where they had left her. The mare seemed unsurprised by the rumbling that now shook the canyon floor. From their elevated position, they soon witnessed the results of their actions. Water began emerging from seemingly solid rock faces throughout the canyon, forming rapidly growing streams that converged toward the prospectors' camp. It's not a destructive flood, Noah observed with relief, just enough to make their position untenable. Below, they could see the prospectors' sudden panic as water began flowing through their camp. Equipment was hastily loaded onto vehicles, core samples abandoned, as the men realized they needed to evacuate immediately. Within 20 minutes, the camp was deserted, vehicles speeding away along the access road, water flowing steadily but controllably through the area they had occupied. Will it damage the ecosystem? Noah asked his mother, suddenly concerned about unintended consequences. Elena shook her head, studying the water flow patterns. It's following natural channels, ones that probably carried seasonal floods for thousands of years before the drought. The system is just restoring old patterns temporarily. Frank chuckled softly. Those boys won't be back anytime soon. Nothing scares off prospectors like unpredictable water in a desert. As they watched the water reclaiming the canyon floor, Echo moved to Noah's side, pressing her muzzle against his shoulder in what felt like approval. We should document this, Elena said, scientist instincts taking over. The way the ancient system incorporates emergency responses could revolutionize modern water management. Joseph smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm. Some knowledge is meant to be shared. The elders will need to discuss which aspects of the system can be documented and which must remain protected. Dawn was breaking as they made their way back to Moon Village, where they were welcomed with a meal and a chance to rest before returning to Green Valley. Noah sat slightly apart from the others, Echo still beside him, though she would normally have rejoined her herd by now. You knew all along, didn't you? He asked the mare quietly. About the prospectors, about the ancient pool, all of it. Echo's intelligent eyes seemed to confirm his suspicion. She had always been more than just a wild horse. She was a guardian of the water, as her ancestors had been for generations. Will you stay? Noah asked, though he already knew the answer. As if in response, distant nickering echoed from the canyon rim. Echoes heard calling for their leader. The mare's ears pricked toward the sound, though she made no immediate move to leave. It's okay, Noah told her, stroking her neck. You have your family and I have mine, but we're connected by something bigger than both of us. Echo lowered her head, allowing Noah to press his forehead against hers in a gesture of profound connection. The wooden amulet grew warm between them, seeming to pulse with shared energy. When she finally pulled away, turning toward her herd's calls, Noah felt not loss but completion. Echo had done what she was meant to do, guided him to protect the waters just as she had guided his father before him. Thank you, he called as she trotted away, pausing once at the canyon rim to look back before disappearing with her family into the wilderness. The water diversion had more far-reaching effects than anyone anticipated. News of the mysterious flood spread quickly, drawing media attention to the unauthorized prospecting activities. When federal authorities investigated, they discovered the prospectors were working for an international mining consortium with a history of environmental violations. The incident accelerated the process of securing permanent protection for the entire canyon system. Within weeks, an emergency conservation order was issued, followed by legislation that established the Green Valley Water Sanctuary, a precedent-setting designation that protected both the water resources and the cultural heritage of the region. At the Water Conservation Center, Elena's team worked with Joseph and the Hopi elders to document the ancient water system in ways that would advance modern conservation efforts without exposing sensitive locations or technologies. The center quickly became internationally renowned, attracting researchers and indigenous water experts from around the world. Robert Rivers, fully recovered from his injuries, established the Miguel Rivera Foundation, dedicated to protecting water rights for indigenous communities throughout the Southwest. Frank Sullivan donated his ranch to the foundation, transforming it into a research station for sustainable ranching practices. 3 months after their nighttime intervention at the prospectors' camp, Noah stood with his mother and grandfather at the newly established observation point overlooking Green Valley. The transformation was now unmistakable. Green spreading along watercourses like veins carrying life back into the desert. Dad would have loved to see this, Noah remarked, taking in the view. He does see it, Joseph replied simply. Through your eyes. Elena put an arm around her son's shoulders. At 13, he was already nearly as tall as she was. The university has offered me a permanent research position here, she told him. We won't have to move to Phoenix. Noah smiled. Good. This is where we belong. Their moment of contemplation was interrupted by Luna, who came running up the trail, excitement evident in her expression. Noah, you need to come quickly. Echo's back, and she's not alone. They followed Luna down to Frank's ranch, where a small crowd had already gathered at the fence line. Beyond the property at the edge of the desert stood Echo with her herd. But what had drawn everyone's attention was the small foal beside her, sand-colored like its mother with the distinctive crescent moon marking on its chest. A new generation, Joseph murmured. The covenant continues. Echo approached the fence, the foal staying close to her side. Noah climbed through the rails to meet them, moving slowly and respectfully. The mare greeted him with familiar affection, allowing him to stroke her neck. The foal watched curiously, neither fearful nor overly bold. Hello, little one, Noah said softly, gradually extending his hand. After a moment's hesitation, the foal stepped forward, sniffing his fingers, before pressing its small muzzle against his palm. He's chosen you too, Luna observed from the fence, just as his mother did. Echo nickered softly as if confirming this interpretation. The wooden amulet around Noah's neck grew warm, its energy seeming to flow between himself, Echo, and the new foal. Frank joined them, watching the interaction with knowing eyes. The old-timers used to say the water-finding horses would always return as long as the land needed them, he remarked. Looks like they're planning to stay a while. As if understanding his words, Echo stepped back, guiding her foal to turn with her. With a final glance at Noah, she led her young offspring back to the waiting herd, all of them disappearing into the desert landscape like spirits returning to their realm. Will they come back? Noah asked, though he already knew the answer in his heart. They never truly leave, Joseph replied. The horses, the water, the memories, they're all part of the same circle. Sometimes visible, sometimes hidden, but always present. 1 year later, Green Valley hosted its first water festival, a celebration marking the official restoration of the region's water system and ecosystem. People came from surrounding states to witness what many were calling a modern miracle, though those who understood the truth knew it was actually ancient wisdom reawakened. The festival combined scientific exhibitions with cultural celebrations, educational workshops with artistic performances. Elena presented the Conservation Center's findings to an international audience, while Joseph and Ahote led traditional blessing ceremonies open to all who wished to participate. Noah, now 14, had been asked to speak at the main ceremony, an honor he had initially resisted but eventually accepted at his mother's encouragement. Your story inspires people, she had told him, not just what happened, but how you changed because of it. Standing before the gathered crowd in the town plaza, Noah looked out at familiar faces, his mother and grandfather in the front row, Robert Rivers and Frank Sullivan sitting side by side like old friends, rather than former adversaries, Luna, and the Moon Village children wearing traditional dress, Sheriff Madison in her mayor's ceremonial sash. 2 years ago, I couldn't speak, Noah began simply. Grief had taken my voice, and drought had taken our water. Both seemed lost forever. He touched the wooden amulet that still hung around his neck. But a horse named Echo showed me that nothing truly valuable is ever completely lost. It just changes form, waiting to be rediscovered by those willing to look beyond the surface. Noah described his journey, not the physical details that had become local legend, but the inner transformation from silent grief to purposeful action. The water crisis taught us that what we thought was a modern problem actually had ancient solutions. The knowledge was always there, preserved by those our society had marginalized and ignored. He gestured to Joseph, Ahote, and the other elders. Their wisdom combined with modern science created something stronger than either could accomplish alone. That's the real lesson of Green Valley. not just about water, but about honoring different ways of knowing. As Noah concluded his speech, a murmur rippled through the crowd. People were pointing toward the hills overlooking the town. There, clearly visible in the bright sunlight, stood Echo and her herd, the yearling colt, now strong and confident beside his mother. "They've come to remind us," Noah said, departing from his prepared remarks. "Water doesn't belong to any one person or group. Like the wild horses, it belongs to the land itself. Our job isn't to own it, but to protect it for generations we'll never meet." The image was powerful. The wild horses, watching over the celebration from their elevated position, symbolic guardians of a resource more precious than gold. After the ceremony, Noah slipped away from the continuing festivities, making his way up the trail toward where he had seen Echo and her herd. He found them still there, grazing peacefully on the ridge. Echo raised her head as he approached, nickering and greeting. The yearling colt, whom Noah had privately named Crescent, watched with intelligent curiosity, having grown considerably in the past year. "I wanted to thank you," Noah said, stopping at a respectful distance, "not just for what you did for me, but for what you did for everyone." Echo approached, allowing Noah to stroke her neck. The connection between them remained strong, a bond formed through shared purpose and mutual trust. As the sun began to set, painting the valley in gold and amber, Noah sat beside Echo on the ridgetop, the colt eventually lying down nearby. Below them, Green Valley, once Dust Valley, thrived with renewed life. The fountain in the town plaza caught the last rays of sunlight, its water sparkling like liquid gold. "Dad used to say that water like memory is never truly lost," Noah said softly to Echo. "It just changes form and waits to be found by those who are worthy." Echo's gentle nickering seemed to affirm this wisdom. "I think I understand now what the covenant really means," Noah continued. "It's not just about protecting water sources, it's about remembering our connection to everything, the land, the animals, each other." As darkness fell, lights came on throughout the valley, reflecting in streams that hadn't flowed 2 years ago. Music and laughter from the festival drifted up to their hillside perch. Eventually, Noah stood to return to town, knowing his mother would be looking for him. Echo rose too, preparing to lead her family back into the wilderness. "You'll come back when we need you, won't you?" Noah asked, though he already knew the answer. Echo pressed her muzzle against Noah's chest, directly over his heart, before turning to her waiting herd. Crescent lingered a moment longer, establishing his own connection with Noah before following his mother. As the wild horses disappeared into the gathering darkness, the wooden amulet around Noah's neck grew warm one last time, a reminder that some bonds transcend physical presence. Noah made his way down the trail toward the lights of Green Valley, carrying with him the legacy of a covenant renewed. Between humans and the land, between modern knowledge and ancient wisdom, between a boy and a horse who had found their voices together in the desert silence. Behind him, the sound of water flowing through revitalized channels mingled with distant hoofbeats, the music of a desert reborn, promising that as long as people remember their connection to the natural world, the water-finding horses would continue to guide those worthy of the journey. As Joseph had said, "The dead walk beside us always." So too did the water that sustained all life flowing beneath the surface, connecting past to present memory, to hope in an endless cycle of renewal. Noah Rivera, once silent with grief, now spoke for those connections. A voice for the water, for his father's legacy, and for a future where ancient wisdom and modern knowledge flowed together, like streams joining to form a river strong enough to sustain generations yet unborn. In the desert night, Echo's distant nickering echoed like a promise kept. The call that had awakened both water and voice returning to the silence from which it had emerged, ready to sound again, whenever the land and its people needed to be reminded of what truly mattered. Water, like love and memory, never truly disappeared. It only changed form, waiting to be found by those who carried the covenant in their blood and the courage to follow where the water-finding horse might lead. Water flows beneath the surface of our lives, connecting past to present memory, to hope in an endless cycle of renewal. Just as the ancient aquifers of Green Valley remained hidden but never truly gone, the voices we think we've lost often wait patiently to be rediscovered. Noah's journey with Echo taught him that silence isn't emptiness. It's a space where we learn to listen more deeply, to the wisdom of elders, to the language of animals, to the quiet truths our own hearts whisper when we're finally ready to hear them. The water-finding horse appears when needed most, not to those who wish to possess, but to those willing to protect. Echo chose Noah not because he was perfect, but because he understood what truly mattered. Connection over possession, memory over forgetting, healing over hiding. What ancient wisdom flows beneath the surface of your own life? What voice within you waits to be heard? What covenant have you forgotten that might need renewing? In a world increasingly parched for meaning, perhaps we all need to follow an echo into the wilderness, to rediscover the sources that sustain us, to remember the promises made by those who came before, and to protect what nourishes not just ourselves, but generations yet unborn. For water, like love and memory, never truly disappears. It only changes form, waiting to be found by those with the courage to follow where the heart leads.